everybody, and welcome to the Burnettwork. Welcome to Positive Fandom. Welcome to PGS Moving Image. I am your host, Artem, and today we have with us Darth Plato. Darth Plato, how are you today?
I'm good. I just saw the movie this morning and I'm eager to talk about it. Thanks for having me on.
It's such a pleasure to have you here, Darth Plato. I can't think of a more appropriate person to have on talking about Oppenheimer, guys. This is PGS Reviews, and we are talking about the new film directed by Christopher Nolan called Oppenheimer, which has been getting a lot of press, a lot of attention. And I think it's remarkable, Darth Plato. You and I have, first of all, talked about a film like this. And some of my concerns, even before the film came out, was the notion of who's going to be interested in this film, because I'm not quite sure, Darth Plato, how people feel about science and about, even let's say the device, if you will, because I'm going to avoid saying certain words, because we're not really talking about the rights or wrongs of any of this stuff. We're just talking about the film and the execution of this film by Christopher Nolan and the accomplishment of it, which was remarkable. But Darth Plato, you and I have been talking about this for months, maybe a year, about this film coming out. Did you expect that there would be this much attention and build up to this film?
Actually, I did because it's always been a touchy subject going back as far as I can remember. There's a lot of passionate discussion one way or the other as far as I can remember when I was in school. Uh, some people agreed with me and some people were really vehemently against me. So it's not surprising to me at all, really, that a movie like this would get a lot of attention from people from different sides of how they support the issue, the use of the atomic bombings on Japan in 1945, um, the the consequences to the world since that time, the fear of nuclear weapons in the 1950s. Anyone that grew up in the 1950s will tell you that the fear of nuclear weapons was something that was around them constantly, and that's not something that you can gainsay. That this fear was real, and it can't just be shoved aside. And people from that generation are they're just going to feel something when they go see this. And just thinking about going to see this movie is going to get them to go see the movie, uh, and which is all the more remarkable because it's such a long movie too.
Yeah, it is a long film for sure. And I did just want to say, and you make a really good point with that, Darth Plato. I want to say hello to Tom Jr. Jackson, moderator, collaborator, and good friend, who says, "Welcome to everybody. Please do hit the like and subscribe for Positive Fandom and for the Burnettwork. It's broadcast on both at the same time." I do want to mention that yes, there will be spoilers, but it's not really a spoiler because we already know what happens. um, Bill. And Bill, I don't want to sound disrespectful to you. I just want to mention to you that we are not deviating away from any of pretty much the historical context, because it's well documented, especially if you follow this sort of historical context. If you're interested in the pre-atomic age and the post-atomic age, if you're interested in that, you already know it. There's nothing that we are going to tell you that's going to ruin the film for you, I don't think.
For
Uh,
sure.
I thank you, Darth Plato, for concurring with that. But I did just want to mention to anybody who is watching, and I put up a little thing saying, "Yes, it's me," and yes, there will be spoilers. And Bill, we're not gonna destroy this film. This is not about that at all. There's so much to talk about this film, Bill. And if there's anything you want to are curious about or have questions about what Darth Plato thinks and what I think, you should go ahead and fire in those questions. Um, out of curiosity, because there's so much in this film. Darth Plato, there's so much in this film. For the 3 hours that you're sitting in the theater, there's so much in it. It's a masterpiece, Darth Plato. It's a masterpiece of a film. And, I think that historically speaking, we wanted this, but did you think we were going to get something this good?
Mm. It was very compelling. The characters involved from the beginning, the how he was homesick and he wanted to go back to America, and the they kind of shoehorned in Albert Einstein, which I love because Albert Einstein was a significant figure in physics and had some very interesting things to say about the history of nuclear weapons afterwards. His involvement with Gene Talek and the themes throughout the movie, but with communism, that his sympathies, whether they were there or not with communism, is a recurring theme throughout the film. It's very significant. The his fear of what he might be unleashing is present throughout the film, and it's very palpable.
Absolutely, Darth Plato. I agree with you. And hello, Mikey Lito, who's also here. Mikey Lito says that he mentioned a number of times that even though we knew what was happening, I found the feature as a thriller, and it illuminates quite a bit of recent history. And I think that if what Nolan's accomplishment was also trying to dramatize a bit of what happened, because it was very dramatic, it certainly was an incredibly dramatic situation that the film centers around, and of course, the life of Oppenheimer. Certainly it is a dramatic story and topic. And as we've said, Darth Plato and I are not going to get into debate about right or wrongs on any of this stuff. We're just interested in looking at this film
Yeah.
and, what is the film conveyed to the viewer? And is it believable? Was it portrayed nice? Darth Plato, there's so much to talk about it, but I did want to mention to the viewers that the film is based on a Pulitzer Prize winning book. And the book is called American Prometheus, The Triumph and Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer. I'm just going to pull it up quickly. And I have been listening to the audiobook, for this. I've been started listening to the audiobook. This is just the title, American Prometheus. And the audiobook, it's not fully, oh, I have the wrong one. Sorry, guys. I got to go bigger. Sorry. Just give me a second here when I get Darth Plato and I back in here. I'll figure it out, Darth Plato.
Nothing like live YouTube.
Because now I have like 20 different screens to choose from, and I can never tell which ones are going to be the smaller ones and which ones are going to be the larger ones. It doesn't say.
Well, let me take this moment to welcome everybody in that's watching. Thank you for being here, and I especially want to say thank you to Tom Junior Jackson for moderating.
Absolutely. Welcome to everybody who is here. Thank you so much for supporting the channels. And it's a pleasure to have all of you who are interested in commenting or making questions or even just any thoughts about this film. And as I said, it's based on a book called American Prometheus. The book won the Pulitzer Prize for autobiography. And certainly it is a remarkable book. I've listened to about half of it. It's a 26-hour listen. It might actually be a little bit longer than that because sometimes I speed up the rate that I'm listening at. But I've listened to about half of the book, and so far, I'm not necessarily going to say, since I haven't listened to the entire book, whether I can go ahead and accurately comment as to whether the adaptation was great. But Darth Plato, as far as I'm concerned, this was a fantastic adaptation from what I've read of the book so far. I think that it's remarkable what an incredible screenplay this is. And, if we're going to look at this film and say, well, the screenplay was wonderful, which I think it was. And even if you haven't read the book, I think you would be impressed with the screenplay. The sound is a character in this film, right, Darth Plato?
It is. I just wanted to point out that I have not read that book, The American Prometheus, so I can't comment on that. As far as the screenplay goes, I tell you what, it's probably the most compelling screenplay movie I've ever seen, where most of the characters are really just sitting across from each other and just talking. It's almost a 3-hour long movie, and most of it is just talking. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you, Darth Plato. And something, it's not easy to do that for a film of this length, of this level of intensity. There was a certain level of intensity that needed to be maintained because of the subject matter. There was no wasted time in this. It was really remarkable. And Bill Parkley says, like with Tennant, is there any part of the movie no, there's absolutely no part of this film that's difficult to hear. In fact, Bill Barkley, this is maybe the best sound and best visuals that I've ever seen in trying to portray something that's not the easiest thing to portray. They wanted to, from what I could tell, give the viewer a vision of what Oppenheimer might be thinking.
Right.
Darth Plato, what did you
know? And we know that he was haunted by this.
Yes, exactly. And what did you think about the combination of the music and the visuals in this particular film for so much of it?
I don't know about the audio. I thought it was okay. As far as the visuals go, speaking as someone that doesn't know anything about special effects, it was pretty compelling. If if that's practical effects, if that's what practical effects really looks like, then I say stick with it. Get rid of this. Get rid of this cheesy computer graphic stuff. Just stick to this. I want to see more of this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would agree with you on this, Darth Plato. I think that we were treated to something that was very rare, very involved, certainly well thought out. It was, as you know, as I've mentioned, it was based on this Pulitzer Prize winning book, which was the inspiration for the film. So it had an incredible amount of detail, and certainly they weren't at a loss for 40,000 views on IMDb, let's say, or rating for 90 and 9.0 out of 10. I think that also tells you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mikey Lito, who says the sound of the film is fantastic, performed by Richard King. And immediately, that's some of the first things you see when the film starts. Darth Plato, there's silence, but then we realize that the sound is so important in this film. Certainly, it plays a huge role. There are some very climactic moments, and of course, the one right behind the poster that we're seeing here. But truthfully, and we're not going to talk about other films, Bill Barkley. I'm sorry, we're not going to talk about any other films that people are trying to, get you to see more than one film. So, Bill, we're not going to respond to that. But I am going to say that if you were a person who absolutely wanted to see the actual Trinity test, which is shown in this film, the real one, if you want to see the real one, you can see it. It's in a film called Trinity and Beyond, which I watched fairly recently, that came out in 1995. The film is narrated by William Shatner, and he talks about the Trinity test and consequently many of the significant tests, although there's hundreds of them that have taken place from the initial Trinity test to, let's say, more modern times. So I think it's very interesting. Darth Plato, do you think that the desire or the notion of making an attempt to show the impact of this test, if you will, because it was a test of the Trinity, these experiments.
That's in New Mexico, yes.
Do you think that the desire to show it on film and effectively was achieved in this movie?
Yes, and especially with practical effects. If you told me that they were going to do that, I wouldn't have believed you. But like I said, if that's what practical effects look like, I want to see more of it. I just wanted to add a point you mentioned before about the Trinity test. Stalin actually learned about what happened with the success of the Trinity test before people at the White House did. And that's because of Soviet spies embedded in the Manhattan Project itself. And so this fear of communist infiltration and the fear of the communists getting the bomb, that was a very real thing. It wasn't exaggerated. That was a real fear. And
do you think that was reflected in the film?
I thought it added a layer to the film that was not quite cloak and daggery, but definitely made almost everyone look over their shoulder and maybe hedge their bets a bit about not sticking their heads out, and you kind of see that with the in the investigation later in the movie where Strauss is trying to bust Oppenheimer and have his security clearance revoked. And so people like, well, would you agree to have Mr. Oppenheimer on the project if you knew what you knew, knowing now what you knew then? And you can see people hedging their bets.
Absolutely, Darth Plato. And I did want to comment to Joe Tyson, hello to you as well, and everybody who's here. Mikey Lito says, if you see one film this weekend, see Oppenheimer. And I can't agree with you more, Mikey Lito. Now, I also wanted to say and kind of start out, because this is not going to be a short discussion. Like, no. This is going to be a long, this is going to be a long video today. And I talked about the idea of the importance of sound in this film, and it is extraordinary. And thank you, Mikey Lito, for mentioning its sound design,
yes,
which is amazing. I also wanted to mention that the music, I think it's the same individual who did much of the music for The Mandalorian, and I think his name is Goranson, was responsible for that, and I feel like he did a fantastic job. and the visuals as well, which were not easy to pull off. These were complicated visuals. They were meant to convey certain feelings or certain concepts of what I often thought looked like atoms, let's say atomic particles, subatomic particles, all of that good stuff, as well as trying to give you an idea of even the size. You know, Darth Plato, I saw this film in IMAX. I wanted to see it in the 70 millimeter IMAX, but it was too far. And I brought my mother with me, or else I might have ventured out to see it myself. But seeing it in IMAX, I was really impressed with how they were able to kind of convey the size and the scope of what they were doing, especially during certain points. Um, what did you think about the casting of the people in this film? I know, and we all know that Cillian Murphy is plays Oppenheimer in it, but the cast alone,
Yeah, yeah.
Plato.
I was going to talk about that. Well, first of all, let me say about Killian Murphy. He's one of my favorite actors for a reason. Maybe today, and we see part of the reason why that is here. If everyone's seen Peaky Blinders, then you know who I'm talking about. If not, this is a great series. Killian Murphy, uh, what can I say? He's one of the best actors today. There were a number of people in the movie. I didn't know they were in the movie, but I recognized them. So Matt Damon's in the movie.
Yes.
I didn't recognize him until I saw him on the train. I knew about Robert Downer Jr. Um, it was kind of funny. It was kind of funny watching him play a bad guy, kind of. Florence Pugh. I didn't recognize Florence Pugh at first. Oh, and Josh Hartnett was in the. I couldn't believe Josh Hartnett was in this movie.
Yeah,
We
Emily.
just saw him.
Yes, exactly. I think that we saw the maybe as far as I'm concerned, these actors get roles that pretty much brought out the best in them,
Yes,
which is
and one
something.
more is Rami is what's his name? Oh, Rami Malek.
Yes, he's in it as well.
I didn't rec. I was like, wait, that's Rami Malek.
Mhm. Yes, he is. He is in the film as well. We also had Kenneth Branagh, who played Niels Bohr, which I absolutely loved that role. He was quite influential over, or at least it felt like he had a huge influence over Oppenheimer in the film. Um, uh, I think that looking at this cast and looking at how much time they spent to make sure everybody was kind of playing the right role, certainly I have to give credit to these casting agents for picking people who were absolutely appropriate in this film. And certainly, I have to say, Darth Plato, I think for many of them, this may be their best roles. Um, what are your thoughts, Darth Plato? And I know it's very premature to kind of like go ahead and say, well, I think this is going to be an Oscar film. I think this is going to be win Best Movie, but I really do think that this is going to be a film that's going to sweep the Oscars. I think it's going to win Best Movie. I think it's going to even win for visuals over Dune, which is coming out later, or may not even come out later this year. Actually, come to think of it, for what they're saying, it may be pushed. But Darth Plato, I feel like this might be even a film where these performances are so. And thank you so much, Mikey Lito, who says we have John Papsadera who casted the film to thank for this. Um, do you think any of these roles? I mean, normally I couldn't say this in a film, but Darth Plato, do you think any of this casting, any of these actors would be up for awards for their performances?
Well, Killian Murphy for sure. I'm not sure about the others. I'm not really an acting critic, but um, I'm just gonna cheerlead for Killian Murphy. Honestly, one I mentioned, Michael Lito says that Gary Oldman was in this movie as Harry Truman. You know, I did not make that connection, so I appreciate Michael Lito for pointing that out.
Absolutely. I did want to mention a few performances, and thank you, Marco, who's here. Marco Esquandoles. Hello, Marco. Says Oppenheimer was fantastic. Thanks for letting us know what you thought of the film, Marco. And yes, I will go to. I absolutely will go to Lincoln Center with you, Mikey Lito. That is where it is in 70 millimeter, right? Mikey Lito, 70 millimeter IMAX. Let's make a date, Mikey Lito, and we will certainly do this. And hello to Rebel Sky. Hello, Rebel Sky. How are you today? Thank you for the $5 super chat. Just want to thank you so much for being so generous to the channels. Rebel Sky says, "Hi, Empress Arden, and to your co-host Darth Plato." The film is great. I think it's this generation's version of JFK by Oliver Stone. Cillian Murphy was terrific. Kudos. Thanks so much, Rebel Sky. Darth Plato, what do you think? Do you want to comment on that? I agree. I think it was on that level of, let's say, cultural significance. Darth Plato, is it this new generation's version, let's say, of JFK?
That's an interesting comparison. I haven't thought about that, but now that I am, the more I think about it, the more I think that that's actually an apt comparison. Uh, yeah, the JFK shooting was definitely one of the iconic moments in people living today in the entire 20th century. If you really think about it, there's not a whole lot of other moments that can really measure up to it. The atomic bombings would certainly be one of them. So yeah, I think that is a good comparison.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks again, Rebel Sky, for your generous $5 super chat. We hope you're doing well. And thank you for being here, sharing your thoughts about the film, an incredible film that was just so amazing. And welcome to J and H Edits. Really hope you are doing well as Brundlefly says, we need more films like this. This film is fantastic. It is.
Amen. Amen.
Yes. And so, Darth Widow, Darth Vader, I'm going to be asking you questions for the next hour or 2 hours because there's so much. Everybody who's watching, if you haven't seen this film, there is so much in this film, and so much of it it's excellent. And I do want to talk about these costumes and having to adapt everything to this time period. Darth Plato, it goes from practically 1930 to what, 1960? It spans a long period of time where we see a lot of change, a lot of growth in the country. What did you think about the costuming and the period and the settings? Because I felt like I was there. What did you
Yeah,
think?
they showed him as a student. I'm not sure what year that would have been, but we know for sure. Well, nuclear fission was invented in 1939. We know that. And what else happened in 1939 was the invasion of Poland, when Hitler invaded Poland. And they show that in the newspaper. They're holding the newspaper. They're looking at that, and it was well known even before that time that the Third Reich was perpetrating grievous crimes against the Jews. And Oppenheimer, being a Jew, was probably very sensitive to that. And that is an angle in this movie: the desire to beat the Germans to the bone.
Absolutely. I think that by going ahead, I almost feel like they had to. This must have been such an incredible undertaking, and I almost feel like they had to go ahead and give us this historical context. The film starts off where it seems like there's, you're at this what I would call maybe a Senate hearing or judiciary meeting or approval meeting or something like that for one of the characters in it, played by Robert Downey Jr. And it turns out
They,
that this character um, absolutely needs to have a certain number of votes for something to go in his favor. And certainly we've seen this
yeah,
historically.
he was. Yeah, I'm sorry. What he was doing is he was trying to be. He was trying to get onto the cabinet.
Mhm.
That's what he.
Absolutely. He wanted to be a cabinet member. And of course, there has to be voting involved in order for him to get this. And I thought it was very interesting that they decided to kind of tell us this kind of almost some major themes in the story, which is obvious. We already know that it's about the atomic age, but we also know that there is a sense, or at least a depiction of McCarthyism. That's what I'm going to call it. Certainly, even if it was not in the exact parameters of McCarthyism, it certainly was, let's say, a form of it. I'm just using it in general terms, not saying whether it was right or wrong. We're not doing that. We're just talking about what was shown in the film. And many of these things were portrayed at the same time as the pursuit of the Trinity experiment. So it was very interesting, Darth Plato, to show the climactic parts during each part. Three different events in this character's life that seem to build up in the same way to a culmination at the end. And I love that they did that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting that. What did you think?
Honestly, I didn't think they were going to do it like this, and I'm not really a fan of nonlinear storytelling, but I think this may be an exception to that. This was actually really well done. I like how they did this.
Yeah, it certainly must have taken a lot of time and thought into trying to build up the
Yeah.
tension and make us have a payoff at the end. And I think what was interesting about this, Darth Plato, and many of us talk about that payoff in a film, you get it. It's like a threefold payoff. if you will, because of, let's say, some of those themes. As I said, it is McCarthyism. Some of the themes were also the idea of, you mentioned when um, Oppenheimer was, let's say, in Cambridge University, and he's was not necessarily at his peak doing experiments, and I get that. And it was interesting to see Niels Bohr explain to him that, something, perhaps you need to go to a place where you can expand your theoretical approach. And, in silico, there is so many scientists who study things in silico versus doing experiments, let's say, or focusing mainly on that. And I think it was very interesting. Did you like this depiction of academia initially, Darth Plato?
And where did he go?
Well, he ended up going to Cambridge, and then he ended up going to Germany for a while.
Well, yeah, but when he
And
came
then
back to the States, where did he go?
I'm sorry?
When he came back to the States, where did he go?
He ended up going to, it looked like he was in Princeton and then in Berkeley, but I don't know which order.
Yes, he was at Berkeley, yes.
So I happen to know that Princeton is very unique because at a time where there was a lot of oppression, they openly accepted Albert Einstein. And
Sure.
I think that was very important. Certainly, one of the greatest minds,
Well,
of many generations.
well, sure.
So,
The
but
theory of relativity was I think he published that in 1905.
yes,
Mhm.
but I think it is also very interesting that they did show an exchange of great minds
Yeah,
across the Atlantic from Europe almost continuously, Darth Plato.
yeah,
And at the time, they were very clear to tell us and to tell the audience that there really wasn't a physics program, let's say a quantum physics program in the US yet. And I think that's very interesting, Darth Plato. The idea that somebody has to build that from scratch today seems impossible and a huge undertaking. Certainly, that's another thing that we have to have some gratitude towards Oppenheimer for, and let's say the department and whoever else was involved. But certainly,
a
it
lot of
does
people
feel
involved.
quite odd with the notion that there wouldn't be one, doesn't it?
Well, just to mention the Manhattan Project, this project, I don't know what it was initially called, but it actually started in England. That's where it was initially based. And there were scientists in England, Canada, and the United States working on this, and of course, uh, German immigrants, people who from other parts of the world. Now, I don't know the thought process behind why they did this, but they're probably because to keep it safe from German bombing. That's probably why they moved it to the United States and they moved it out to New Mexico. That's literally the middle of nowhere, and you can't get more middle of nowhere in America than New Mexico. And so that's why they was ended up there. And there was uh, there was no holding back by the government. They threw everything, anybody, and however much money you needed, they just threw at it. And it was the top secret. Yeah, this project was so top secret, not even Truman knew about it when he was vice president.
Yeah, and we definitely have to talk about that in detail, which we are. I have many questions for you about this, Darth Later, which I have not begun to ask you, but I certainly will ask you about that just in general, because there's a lot to talk about it, because it's such common knowledge today. It's common knowledge today, but at a time where people didn't even have televisions, and relied heavily on newspapers, if you will. Where the majority of people might have gotten their news. You might have even not gotten your own newspaper. You might have borrowed your neighbor's paper, which I have seen people do, in offices and things like that. How different communications and things were for people. Certainly, having those academic departments already set up and having that, let's say, network to know where to go when you're not happy, which is essentially the film starts out um, where Oppenheimer is clearly not necessarily in a happy place. And they talk about that. And this is going to kind of address what you're talking about, Mark Spector's Avatar, who is here and talks about this nude scene that we saw. And I think Mark Spector, okay, we hear you. We certainly are not going to say, we hear what you have to say, and I hear what you're saying. You felt that was not necessary in one scene. And I think Mark Spector's Avatar, it was shown for a number of reasons. This is just my speculation. This is just my opinion. I don't know if this was Christopher Nolan's, intention to show it for these reasons, but I think it was shown to exemplify that Oppenheimer needed to have intimacy in his life, and he was going to have it. And if he didn't have those intimate connections, he would not have that would have perhaps contributed to his unhappiness. So he needed to have those intimate moments. But the second one, the scene where he's sort of in a room and his wife is seeing this, I don't think she necessarily might have known all the details of the affairs that he might have had. And of course, that, especially during that time period in the United States, for any spouse to hear that their spouse has been unfaithful in that detail is an embarrassment. It's really just absolutely one of the most upsetting and disappointing things you can hear. And I'm sure that's what she was seeing. It was not an enjoyable moment, I think, for him. It was her viewing this and realizing that the other people in the room did not care if they embarrassed her and if they made her look like a fool in this case. What do you think, Darth Plato? This is just my theory. It doesn't even matter whether about that. I like nude scenes. I felt that it wasn't untasteful, but I felt that that boardroom scene was sending a message of how embarrassed his wife was to hear all those details.
Well, my initial reaction when I saw it was, do we really need this? This isn't really necessary. But when you explain it the way you explained it, yeah, you could be right. Nolan is a good director, so I don't think he put it in there just to be. He doesn't strike me as a sleazy director, so he's surely not putting there because he's sleazy. There must be some sort of reason behind why he's doing it. So, yeah, what you said is probably compelling. I think I'd go along with that.
Then the second part, of course, Darth Plato, and you're probably even more aware of this than I am, was also to embarrass Oppenheimer himself, and to kind of air out his dirty laundry, which no one wants to have things like that in their personal lives put out there. But it was meant to kind of trivialize anything that he was doing. He was under interrogation, from what I could see in the film, a very unfair interrogation, and it was meant to be embarrassing. It was meant to be. Wouldn't you be embarrassed if something like that happened in a room like that? It was meant to be uncomfortable. That was not a love scene. That was something that was meant to be shocking because it was. And that's how I interpret it, Mark. But who knows? Maybe a few years from now, Christopher Nolan will give us the movie commentary, and that might not be the reason. But personally, I think that's the reason. And you make a good point, Mark. It's something to think about. I don't know about that, G&H. Yes, I just wanted to check just quickly. Now, Darth Plato, I have so much more to ask you about. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, too, another theme, at least I think was in this, had to do with professional jealousy. And, it's heavy in this story, mainly because there's so much at stake. And what's ironic is that as you're being pushed and pulled and there's a lot of currying favor and people are working so hard to get this thing done, you're constantly made aware of how it feels as if overall there are some individuals who will just be somewhat more ruthless than others. However, it doesn't stop you from enjoying this. This was fun to watch. And I thought to myself, great, now I'm enjoying seeing this situation. And I feel sorry for anybody who has to go through that type of interrogation. But I also thought it was important for people to see it because I could never understand what it would be like to be interrogated during that time period. Did they do a good job of showing what I would consider some professional jealousy, but also that McCarthyism era that was so difficult to go through for these people who were under this type of interrogation, Darth Plato?
Well, McCarthy wasn't the only guy doing that.
Well, I'm using it as a general term, of course, for that time period, anybody who was accused of communism, let's say.
Oh yeah, for sure. That was definitely the it was called the Cold War for a reason, and it was because of the fear of Soviets. Nuclear war, Soviet invasion of Europe. That was a fear going all the way up to 1990.
Yeah.
KGB infiltration into America, infiltration into Hollywood. There was news about that too, and infiltration in academia. There was gosh, that not just in the 50s and the 40s. It actually goes back to the 30s. There was a reporter in the New York Times who went to Russia in 1931-32, when he came back to the United States. He witnessed mass famine and mass death, and he didn't mention one word of it all. And in his piece in the New York Times, and he was named Walter Duranty, and he was given a Nobel Prize. No, not a Nobel Prize, but the Pulitzer Prize. What I meant to say, the Pulitzer Prize for journalism for reporting this news, which turned out to be not news at all because he didn't report any what was really happening, and the Pulitzer Prize was actually revoked from the New York Times because of this. It was a real scandal back in those days, and that was 1932 that they were talking about here. So yeah. And by the way, the New York Times does still have the Pulitzer in their trophy case. They haven't taken it out.
And I'm going to find out what the proper word would be for this because, I always use that term because if I don't use that term, I think what happens, I kind of feel like, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, I kind of feel like this might be one of his attempts to demonstrate that fear of it all.
Fear
And
what?
even of the spread of communism.
Yeah.
And even though, let's say, I'm not here to judge anybody, but let's say, these interrogations, clearly the film depicted it as an unfair interrogation. I would say yes. When I watch this certainly is an unfair interrogation, but I don't know how to describe it other than calling it by that M word, because that's the one that we always hear where there was sort of, let's say one of the major ones. And many people know more about that one and its association with communism. So I'm sure there's probably another academic term for it. So who's ever out there and knows what it is, I'm sorry, I didn't describe it right. But I just felt like it was an incredible similarity to what we might have been seeing. I know one of the major differences with the McCarthyism was that it was in an open room. And that was another thing, Darth Plato, you find out certain things as this film goes on, that this was going to be something that was done in a closed room. It was
Sure.
very hush hush. But for the record, which means anybody could go ahead and pull this information and look at it. And it's quite shocking. But what's even more shocking, and I guess it's not that I hadn't heard about this, but I had no idea how popular communism was, let's say early on, let's say in the 1920s. I had no idea that that was a thing.
Oh yeah.
I'd seen it, but I didn't know that people were excited about it. This is something that I think the film does. What did you think about the treatment of, let's say, the members of the party who were excited about it and had hopes that this might be the answer to a lot of things?
You mean Strauss?
Yes, whomever was supportive of the Communist Party in the
Oh,
film. What did you think about how they had hopes for it? In fact, they were almost arrogant about it towards Oppenheimer and
I
anyone
don't
else who
know.
was on board. What do you think
I
about the portrayal in the film?
I don't know. I don't know where they were going with that. I think they were the way they were. They believed what they believed. They were openly communist. Well, I guess not Oppenheimer. Certainly, Gene was certainly Gene was for sure. He was openly a member of the Communist Party of America. As far as translated, as far as what the Manhattan Project, I don't see how that was going to advance the cause at all. Um,
Hmm. But I
well,
certainly,
Stalin had the Communist International. The Communist International was set aside. He got rid of that, and it was replaced by the Comintern. So the Comintern was based out of Russia. That was something that Stalin did. So there definitely was a pipeline all over the world of infiltrating societies around. There was an Italian communist, Antonio Gramsci, who wrote about this. You still hear his name mentioned a lot in universities today. A lot of the stuff still exists. Is that they sort of they've hollowed out the communism. They replaced it with more modern stuff like identity stuff. And I won't go into that anymore. But it's still around. It hasn't gone away. That sort of thing's still around. So I don't know what these people were. I don't know what their goals were. I don't.
hmm. And it is interesting because, certainly these, whatever their ultimate goal was, it was interesting to see it put into a context where they were meeting and they were excited, and this was certainly a different type of point of view of, let's say, that political idea. And I think it was translated very well. It was is adapted very well. for us on the screen to understand, this is something they believed in, and certainly they were passionate about it. Mark Spector's Avatar for a $9.99 super chat. Thank you so much, Mark Spector's Avatar. I so appreciate the generous super chat there. Says, I love the film, and it was beautifully shot. Nothing like IMAX, and my theater was full. Haven't seen that since Avengers Endgame. Thank you so much, Mark Spector's Avatar, for the $9.99 super chat. And Mark, my theater was full as well. And I saw a lot of sold out, grayed out areas. You wanted to buy another ticket for a certain time. Stuff was grayed out. Darth Plato, did you have that same experience? Was your theater, did you see a lot of sellouts for certain times?
Well, I went there at 9 in the morning. There was this morning. There was probably about four or five other people in there when I walked in. I saw two more people come in after me down close to where I was, but then they kind of backed up further away. But I was in the third row, so I honestly don't know how many people. I kind of sat down for a while. I didn't really leave right away, so people probably left before I did. So I honestly don't know how many people there. It was probably more, including myself. There's probably about 8 people there, as far as I knew. But then again, it is 9 in the morning, and it is a suburban area. It's not. I mean, come on. Some of you guys are out in what, New York, Los Angeles. You're gonna get more people in your theaters.
Yeah, that's okay. That's very interesting. And it is something to think about. And thank you, Mark Spector's Avatar, for the $9.99 super chat. We are talking about Oppenheimer, the new film, the new Chris Nolan film, which we can't stop talking about. I also want to mention Tom Jr. Jackson for a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Tom Jr. Jackson, moderator, collaborator, and good friend. We are all goof people. Tom says, I really liked the movie, but it was powerful. It was very powerful, Tom Jr. Jackson. It certainly was a powerful film. And we have only just started to scratch the surface of this film.
Yeah, yeah.
And
The sound, how they use sound to there's kind of silence, and then that rushing, rumbling like a train coming on. All of a sudden, it's so loud in the theater, and you're like, "Wow, does it really need to be this loud?" It's actually pretty effective. And the Trinity explosion, how it's you can see it, you're looking at it, and he's taking off the goggle and he's looking at it. And everybody's like, can't believe what they're seeing. Then the sound shows up and it just washes over you. The only thing in the modern world that I can think of that really comes close to that would probably be observing a space shuttle launch, because you're far enough away so that you can see the flash of the ignition of the shuttle going up, but you don't hear it right away because light is faster than sound. And when the sound shows up, it floors you, and that's
it
what it
really
does.
does. I'm trying to find a photo of it, but yeah, Darth Plato, you make such a good point with this. Certainly, I think that they're going to be nominated for sound. I think that it's going to be something that I think a lot of people are going to remember forever. He's a kind of a picture of Oppenheimer looking at the Trinity experiment um, here in the photograph, and it was a super bright light. And as I said, if you want to see the real one, you can see it in Trinity and Beyond, which is a documentary made in 1995 that is narrated by William Shatner. Um,
I've
but
seen
it
it.
does, yes, and it is a great documentary, but it doesn't have the same effects that this film has, right, Darth Plato?
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, because it's a little bit more scholarly in how it's presented. It is effective, honestly. When they were showing the hydrogen bomb explosion, there was some real drama about that, because the people that were at the observation post watching the hydrogen bomb explosion, there was a lot of alarm because the temperature kept going higher and higher and higher, and they thought they were going to die. You can hear them talking about it on the radio. So there's definitely tension in watching. But yeah, it's not the same as a movie, but it's real life.
Absolutely. Tom Jr. Jackson says the sound was excellent, but the Trinity explosion was impressive. Certainly, certainly. Mikey Lito says that was a stunning scene.
Yeah.
Darth Plato. It certainly was, Mikey Lito.
Yeah,
Um,
and also the part where after the Japan surrenders and he's out giving the speech, that whole scene was also really impressive too, where he's just sort of presaging a potential nightmare's future. What if we lose control of it all? And and it all goes to hell. And you see that also in the conference room where tensions fly, and he's having this premonition of, well, what if? It's effective.
It certainly is effective, and here's one of those scenes where it's after I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly in the film, but it's after either the Trinity experiment or when there were more bombings, the initial bombings, and I think that it was a very overwhelming. I think they made a great visual effect of showing how overwhelming and the magnitude of, honestly, I think in what they were trying to portray was that all of this weight and magnitude of what happened was on the shoulders of Oppenheimer. And certainly we see Niels Bohr, who's played by, why can I remember the man's name? Kenneth Branagh, who says, oh, well, you know something? Um, After this happens, you have to make sure, nothing else goes further. And I think it was interesting. I think Oppenheimer might have been thinking about this, but they certainly did a great depiction of the gravity of how he felt. It was almost as if the sound of everybody cheering when the war, let's say, was over or declared over. At least I think that was maybe the scene. And certainly, it's something to think about going forward
Well,
there, because we do know that he does get involved in politics, right, Darth Vader?
Oppenheimer got involved in politics. I didn't know that.
Well, they seem to imply that he did after he appeared. Well, did you get that impression that
No,
he
I
got
didn't.
involved in politics from this film?
No, I didn't get that impression. I got the impression that he was being pushed out the door because he wasn't needed anymore. That's the impression I got.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I want to say one more thing about the that, and something that they showed, but they could have expanded on this more, is the motivation between for Killian Murphy for Oppenheimer was the Germans were working. They had their own version of the nuclear bomb project. That's just true. It turned out to be woefully inadequate for what they were trying to achieve, but that wasn't known at the time. So they knew that this was being worked on. It was known, and Oppenheimer was bothered by it because he was Jewish, and the thought of the Nazis getting the bomb was very frightening, as it should have been. And then the war was over. The war ended in Europe before the bomb could ever be realized. The Trinity bombing, I believe, was in March. That was right about the time when the Allies were pushing into Germany. So the outcome of the war was pretty well decided that Germany was going to lose the war. The question was who was going to reach Berlin first? Was it going to be the Allies or was it going to be the Russians? So that was still the open question. There was no question that the bomb wasn't going to be used. Okay, VE Day happens. VE Day happens, and okay, so now what? Now you have the scene where they're sitting in the room. They're talking about the Japanese, and you have a very real question: is how they're going to use the bomb there. Oppenheimer seems to have a problem with this, and I'm kind of curious, why does Oppenheimer have a problem with this? Uh, why does he want America to have the bomb to use against the Nazis? Possibly. Okay, I understand he doesn't want the Nazis to get it. I understand that. So he wants to use the bomb to make sure that the Nazis don't develop it first and use it. So Germany's defeated. Okay, so Germany's defeated. And Germany was a wicked government that needed to be destroyed. But how is the Japanese government not equally wicked? They weren't persecuting Jews, that's true, but they did attack the United States, and the U.S. involvement in the war was because of Pearl Harbor, not Germany. So I don't really see how he's sort of justifying. Okay, I'm fine with using the bomb against Germany, but not against Japan. I'm not seeing that. They could have expanded on that a little more, and what the objections could have been for that. Oh, you're okay with it here, but you're not here. I would have liked to see a little more of that.
Yeah, and certainly that is something that I think they obviously got information from his letters and perhaps from his lectures and different things like that. And I think if I'm not quite sure whether the film is asking us or stating his opinion on one matter or another. I think, if anything, it's telling us that he felt he had to have an opinion on it. and that he felt he had to be involved in decision making going forward.
It's almost like he was saying, it's okay to use the it's okay to use the atomic bomb, but only if it's people harassing Jews. I hate to think that that's actually what he's trying to say, but it almost feels like that's what he's saying.
That's an interesting point. I don't know what he was trying to say in it, so I can't comment. But it is something to think about, and something that people might address and talk about. Maybe Nolan will address it for sure about it. Another thing that was very interesting too, and of course, this is the Manhattan Project. And I told you, Darth Plato, I do want to ask about this and the creation of it. As I said, at a time where most people didn't have televisions, they had radio. Maybe they had a newspaper from a neighbor, or they had their own paper.
And movie theaters.
And movie theaters, which was
right. That's how most people got the visuals from the war. In those days, during the intermission or other parts of the movie theater experience, they showed film footage from Europe and other parts of the world of what was going on. That's how people saw for their own eyes what was going on. And you had to go to the movie theater to see it.
And the movie tone news, which I think is what you're referring to, along with a bunch of other reports and things, that was it. There was no other way for people to get information or news. And they do talk about how this was top secret and where were they going to go for, to do this project. And everybody knows about the project, the Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
Do you think modern people, because we've heard the name Einstein a lot, and I was asking people about this. We've heard the name Einstein a lot. If you're a scientist, you've heard of all these people in this film. I'm a scientist,
I love it.
And I've heard of every single one of these researchers. So, they were not names that I'm unfamiliar with. But what I'm curious about is, do people know Oppenheimer in general the way they know Albert Einstein in general today? And obviously this film is going to bring attention to Oppenheimer, but do you think that there was ignorance in general about who Oppenheimer was and how he was involved in this project in the general population, let's say, in the world today?
Yeah, at the time, I don't think so. Not at the time. Nowadays, probably, because kids seem to be ignorant about all kinds of things. Okay, nowadays, kids don't even know that there wasn't such a thing as World War II. If you walk down the street and ask people who were we fighting in World War II, and they say England, they're not going to know. So yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. Einstein was a household name for a lot of reasons, because he said colorful things. He was a really colorful guy. I love the fact that Einstein's in the movie.
Yeah.
And you can see him. You can see his crazy hair and everything. It was really well done how they had him in there. I'm glad that they didn't show him like picking up a bug and eating it, because he wouldn't know to do that. There he is, right there.
He's a recognizable figure for most people around the globe.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
And I'm just making the comparison of the fact that Oppenheimer is not a recognizable figure for most people around the globe. However, he can't. I'm sorry?
You might be right about that. It could just be the visuals. I mean, the visual of Einstein. He's so unmistakable.
It's true. However, at let's say, I'm not going to say, they're two different people. But what I think is interesting is that Oppenheimer was also on the cover of Time and Life and all that stuff, so people got to see who he was in a way that I'm not going to say that, he made himself public or open to the public at a time where the spotlight was on this project. It was an important project. So for a long time, he was considered, or at least the film implied, that he was the most famous scientist in the world. How could he go from, so this is my question, how could he go from being the most famous scientist in the world to what I would consider a somewhat more obscure scientist in such a short period of time, when Einstein was popular, let's say 1910 to now, continuously, or at least feels more continuous in popularity? How could we explain this?
I honestly don't know the answer. That's such a good question. I wish I knew the answer.
Does the film make an attempt to say that that Oppenheimer's interactions with Strauss and perhaps let's say even the president. It's not a bad thing, but let's just say his interactions or the way he was received by them at some point might have led to him being not as popular.
You mean Oppenheimer?
Yes.
Honestly, I think it's the rumors about communism. I mean that's about as radioactive as you can get, and I mean, pardon the pun, but I think that's true. And speaking, I just want to say one more thing about Einstein.
Yes.
I,
Yes.
Einstein said something really colorful that I never forgot. He said he was asked about what he thought World War III would look like, and he said, "Well, I can't tell you what World War III will look like, but I can tell you what World War IV will look like: sticks and stones." And that's really powerful if you really think about it.
Yes. Yes. Certainly. Yeah. Yeah. And that is a profound comment. Certainly, Einstein's vision of the future, which was quite grim when looking at it from that point of view, a warning to us all. Hopefully, we could avoid, any more wars. And Rebel Sky for a $5 super chat again. Thank you so much, Rebel Sky, for supporting the channel and being here. Hope you are well again. Thank you so much. Says, hey, RM, I'm writing a novel, a sequel to a popular film that was the firing spark of World War II. I am almost done, but I'd love to send you a preview clip. I would love to see that, Rebel Sky. Absolutely reach out to me at the Burnettwork or at Positive Fandom. You can reach out to me in either place. Please do send it my way, Rebel Sky. I so appreciate that. You can give me your email address and I can email you or either one. But it's such a pleasure and congratulations on writing and certainly writing about history. I always admire people who take on history because it is so important for us to see things like that. Um, uh, Retro, I really like that. Retro says a lot is memory a hold, warped and mythologized concerning U.S. role before and after World War II. Um, yeah, I hadn't thought about that from that point of view. This is very interesting um, and something to think about. And I'm going to try and send
I
my
suppose, huh? Well, every country is self-serving in how it tells its own history. It wants to glorify itself for morale purposes and for promoting it and for projecting its power and how it's seen by other countries. So yeah, sure, okay. But so does every other powerful country that's ever lived.
Darth Plato, and I have no choice but to ask this question because the question itself is presented and there are some profound statements in it about being Prometheus, and of course it's the name of the book it's based on, and being the killer of all people or something to that effect. I don't have the exact wording in Sanskrit.
You mean what Oppenheimer said after the bomb after the explosion?
Yes, and he also says it. I think when he's with the young lady that he's with, he has the Sanskrit book that he's reading it. God bless him for reading Sanskrit, but he's reading parts of the passage where it's found, right, Darth Plato?
Yeah, it's a Hindu thing from the Vedas. He says, "I am death. I become the destroyer of worlds." That's what he said.
And I think it's amazing. It certainly sounds very superhero-ish. I think we've seen this in a lot of comics as well. For some of the baddies, some of the bad guys in those roles certainly inspired a lot of people. That passage alone, aside from what we're talking about, of course, but I wanted to kind of talk about the atomic age. And since you and I, that's all we know is the atomic age. We don't know anything else like that. But how did this have an effect? And we kind of saw what happened um, with Oppenheimer himself and how this affected him. He seemed to have been shaken. He's been shaken by all this, as we know. But how did people even understand what this atomic age was going to bring? Did the average person understand in 1945 or even in 1955 what this really meant, other than that they had to hide in case there was a bomb coming?
I don't. The simple answer is no. People couldn't possibly have processed it. Look, you're talking about something that was utterly unknown to the history of the world. American Prometheus is aptly named because Prometheus in the classical legend brought something that was not previously known before to humanity. Humanity would never change, was never the same after meeting Prometheus. Oppenheimer gave the world something that it never knew existed. And on the one hand, there's a lot of potential for good there because there is, but it's scary at the same time because our exposure to it on the world stage was in the form of a bomb. So how else can we look at it? Could the people of that generation looked at it except with fear? It's I can't gainsay that. It's perfectly under anyone that grew up. I said this at the top of the show. Anyone that grew up in the 50s will tell you that it was really scary to live in that time because they were always talking about it. There's drills about what do you do in a nuclear attack. It was common. So yeah, I don't think people understood what was going on at all. I don't think people in the White House understood it because the implications it has for military science going forward. And I don't want to get into that can of worms. This is something I'm interested in talking about, but I won't get into it here because we'll just be here all day.
Well, I
But
felt
there were consequences. Look at Hello Vietnam and other things directly affected by the introduction of nuclear weapons. It completely skewed military science.
and I think it's important to note it, Darth Plato, only because I think they want the viewer, you and I, to think about it. And certainly, you and I have thought about this. If you're in academia, this is a conversation that we've all had a
Yeah.
thousand times. And even
Oh
if
yeah.
you're not in academia and you're interested in it, then it's a conversation you've had a thousand times. But I almost think that they wanted the average person to think about this. Do you think that that was one of the intentions of the film?
I think it's kind of obvious that was the intention of the film. Maybe not in the way that an activist would say, "Oh, we're going to create something that will be a call to action." So I don't get the sense that it was that kind of a project. Nolan is a good director that wants to create something that people are going to talk about for years to come, and he's choosing something that really happened that uh, captures a lot of imagination for good or ill. And I think that he was looking at it kind of like that. I think it was effective.
Hmm. Um, I had to ask that question only because I don't know. You see, if we're looking at this in the context that is realistic, and this is not a right or wrong thing. This was during World War II.
Hmm.
And at that time, I'm going to say that the majority of people who were alive then wanted the war to end.
Yes.
And so this notion of what was on their mind was just that the war would be over. But it's almost as if the manner upon
It's
the
actually
film.
worse than that. It's worse than that actually, because not only was the war going on, but there was the prospect of invading Japan. You understand that would have been an enormously difficult task. It would have dwarfed D-Day by at least a factor of 10, at least. It would have been multiple landings. The southern island of Kyushu. It would have been at the Kanto Plains in '46. There would have been bombing all over Japan, including the rice harvest. So you're looking at 10 million dead before the end of 1945 alone. That bare minimum, and that's going to continue until 1946. They were literally going to starve these people into submission. The invasion of Japan would have been the largest operation in the history of the world, bar none. And we're talking about invading a people that had never been successfully invaded. The Mongols twice tried to invade Japan, and they were both spectacular failures. So this was a very heavy thing that people had on their minds. It had to be done, so people were going to do it, but people were not optimistic about this being done quickly or with low casualties. This was going to be a massive bloodletting for everybody involved. The fact that the Japanese government surrendered at all, after everyone saying, "Oh no, they're not going to surrender," they'll never surrender because they're fanatic. Well, the government didn't surrender. The Hirohito kind of did it on his own. There's a whole story behind how that happened. The government actually didn't surrender. The Hirohito forced them into doing it. It's a little hard to explain, but that was unexpected, and because it was unexpected, the war ended like that, and people were, yeah, no kidding, people were celebrating it. And that's something that in the celebration scene, and you see in the movie, and Oppenheimer kind of haunted by it. Yeah, okay, I understand that he's haunted by it because of what he's personally done. But you have to understand, people were jacked up for a reason. They thought that they were going to be in this invasion that was going to go on for a year, 2, 3 years, with massive casualties stacked to the ceiling, and all of a sudden it was over in a flash, and people couldn't believe it.
And do you think the film conveyed this? Because I think for many of us who are watching this, who are on the stream right now, uh, who know a little bit more about this, understand what it means. But in the context that you and I are talking about it, the notion of being at war, which I've never been in a country where they're full on war like that. So at the time of the war, and I think it's very different for those who experience this feeling that your country's at war is a very different feeling. It probably creates chemical changes in your brain because it's something that you can't ever ignore and does have a profound effect on you. So I just was curious. I personally think they did a great job of trying to show the context of what this would mean even for the average person, trying to understand or just having this feeling of thank goodness the war is over. I think they absolutely had to represent that and show that. I felt like they did a good job in the film of it. What did you think, Darth Plato?
About what? I kind of got distracted by something. I'm sorry.
Do you think that they were able to convey the general feeling of people at the time, the general feeling of the military at the time of wanting the war to end, and that entire understanding that of we're at war and this is a war? There's a part where Matt Damon's character is trying to convince one of the scientists to work with, and the guy says, well, I don't think I want to do it. And he says, don't you realize this is the most fucking important thing in the whole fucking world? Like, and it was like something that he felt he had to convey in a way that maybe perhaps you and I wouldn't do. But he had to express this. And I almost wonder if he's expressing it not just to the scientist, but to the viewer.
The short answer is yes, but I think they kind of underscored it. Like I said, the movie doesn't really convey just how daunting a task invading Japan would have been. So in the absence of that, it really does kind of shrink that. So yeah, okay. So the American military people are serious about getting this done. Okay, well, go figure. But that's my answer.
Darth Plato, you and I have discussed this point a little bit more too, about what did the general public know, and even with the information they were given, obviously some of these soldiers, some of these guys who've been to the front, some of these let's say upper management government officials knew a little bit more because they've seen a little bit more of what was going on, but they were not able to divulge that information to the general public. And so there's a lot that the general public wouldn't know at the time. However, they know they're at war, and it's not a good feeling to be at war. It's something they want to end as soon as possible. And the notion of extending the war was something that was not a good feeling. No one wanted that.
No.
Tom, and guys, please do subscribe to Tom Jr. Jackson's channel. I have his link here right here in the panel there. You can see it there. Please make sure you like and subscribe to his channel here on YouTube. I also want to welcome.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to welcome PCVM99. Hey, how are you? Says, saw the movie and the final hour was intense. Thank you, PCVM99, for being here and sharing your thoughts about the film. And what were you going to say, Darth Plato?
Well, it wasn't just the general public that didn't know. Most of the people in the military and the government didn't know. I mean, Truman, when he was vice president, didn't know. Now, Truman knew that there was something called the Manhattan Project, but he didn't know what it was. Now, when he was a senator before 44, he was brought on to the ticket in 44 to replace somebody else. I don't remember his name. And he got sacked. The Truman came on, and he became vice president. And he tried to corner General Marshall one day and said, I asked about this when I was a senator. Now I'm vice president. What is the Manhattan Project? And General Marshall said, look, please don't ask me about that. I can't talk about that. And, real polite and how he went about it. But what FDR died, I believe he died on April 12th, and Truman came in. And when Truman came in, who was in the Oval Office waiting for him? It was General Marshall. And General Marshall told him what was going on. So even Truman didn't even know. And Truman was the one who ultimately made the decision to use the bomb. He didn't even know until April 12th what it was. So forget the average citizen. Um,
Well, you
yeah.
know something, and I thank you for answering that and clarifying it, because this is a historical film and it is a dramatization of the book, but it certainly is historical. There's no doubt about it that this film will be watched in millions of classrooms over the next, let's say 20 years. And this will be the go-to film that they see. Of course, there's going to be like an hour and a half version made of this. I'm sure of it. Someone will cut it up. But to be honest with you, Darth Plato, I think that the worth of this film is almost unmeasurable. And Keely Chow is with us tonight. Keely Chow, I hope you are well. Hope everybody is well here. Certainly hope everybody is having a good night, and so glad that you all are here. I have a few more things that I wanted to talk about.
Mhm.
And, we talked about the atomic age, and certainly where they talked about, I know in the book they talked a little bit more about Oppenheimer's background, and they talk about how he mentions he's from a different side of the, of Manhattan, and he was brought up differently. But if in the end, it seems like he enjoyed, obviously, New Mexico very much, in Pecos National Park. I've never been to Pecos National Park. I've been to New Mexico a lot, actually, but I've never been to Pecos. At least I don't think I've ever been there. Maybe my parents took me there, but I doubt it. Um, and I think, he thought that that was a great place to go ahead and do this secret project. No one's going out there. No one went out there. There's one point where they're working on everything, and I just loved this visual. I don't have a picture of it, but they had a fish bowl, or let's say it looks like a fish bowl. It's probably a punch bowl or something like that, a trinket bowl, and a glass, a wine glass. And they had these marbles, which they used to show sort of quantities of radioactive isotopes.
Yeah, it was Culture Casino's wine glass.
Well, shout out to Culture Casino. Culture Casino, I hope you are well. And guys, if you do watch YouTube, you probably know who he is. And certainly do check out his channel. It's wonderful. I love Culture's 6 minutes, news in 6 minutes, which I watch every day. Um, but what I loved about it was that the film seems to continually use rather simple and incredibly understandable methods to describe what is needed. And so here they were talking about, well, in order to do this one, we have to fill this wine glass, but in order to make the big one, we have to fill this fish bowl.
Right.
And the marbles represented, of course, the quantity of radioactive
Right.
isotopes they would need. What did you think about doing that? I don't know if that was true. It might be in the book. Maybe they did do that. But what did you think about them deciding to show things to explain to people how this works, and kind of make them understand that there's something inside that bomb, and what's inside it? There's a reaction, and that's what causes the explosion.
Honestly, I think that's just something that Nolan put in there as a process of learning more about the the time period and the events itself. I mean, anyone that's taught will tell you that the bet you don't learn more than you do from teaching. You learn a lot from teaching. And I assume that when you're making movies about a period piece, you're going to learn something because you're researching it. So Nolan probably learned some stuff when he researched this movie. He probably wasn't an expert going in, so he probably learned about this thing about the wine glass and the the glasses and what they were doing with the, I guess their marbles. I'm not sure what they were, and he was probably really impressed by that and decided to put it into the movie. And I thought I'm really glad he did. I thought that was an interesting little thing they showed to illustrate how this worked. It was it's just simple, common objects, and they arranged it in a way that actually almost kind of makes sense coming from someone that was not a science major.
Yeah, I think it was an extra step to explain to people without necessarily having to go to a point where it didn't make any sense. I think that it was very carefully thought out and very understandable. As the bowl filled up, it meant that they were even closer to possibly being able to finish the construction. Gee, Darth Plato, they even showed you the construction, some of it, not everything, but a good portion of, them assembling the parts. And it felt like you were putting together a model or something. It was very impressive. We saw some of the scientists depicted there. There was a variety of faces we didn't hear everybody's name, but in the book they're mentioned and they're well known throughout history. I also thought one also very important part had to do with William Borden. I hope I'm saying the right name. He was a pilot, and he talked about seeing a V-2 rocket fly by him at night. He was in his plane, and there was some kind of launching that had taken place, and they showed it, Darth Plato. They showed it visually in the film, what he described, and I think it's very interesting because a lot of what we're talking about, of course, it's recorded, but someone had to describe and write down all this information. This is maybe one of the most well recorded operations in history. But I wasn't expecting to hear him say that. And I thought that that was very interesting to talk about how he saw a V-2 rocket, which we know during the Blitz was a terrifying rocket. It made, and I think it was the one that had that humming sound that was terrifying. People could hear it coming.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it was after the Blitz, but it was definitely something that happened. The Germans were bombarding England with the V1 and V2 rockets. That was true, but I think it was after 1940.
And what's really interesting about this, that he even made an attempt to do a visual like this. And at even some point, Oppenheimer imagined himself, which is another thing that I thought was very notable, is that we do see how he manages to take the information that someone's given him, kind of digest it, and then think about how that's going to affect that person's research or move or his, and bring this together. What did you think about that scene? Because it looked unbelievable.
I can imagine what it would have been like to do that kind of a job. So all I can do is just salute it. I can't imagine it.
Hmm. And I really thought that it was incredible. And Tom, is Culture here? You mentioned Culture. I thought maybe he was here and I missed him. Culture, if you're here, hello to you. um, Now, there's one other thing I also want to talk about, and it has to do with when Oppenheimer talks about the psychological impact of the device.
The psychological
And
impact.
yes, and I think leading from talking about the V-2 rockets, and we know the psychological impact
Oh yeah,
of these
yes.
individuals and how it felt for them to do that, and how Oppenheimer felt that they weren't discussing that. Um, and I also think that they want you, meaning you and I, the viewer, the observer, to think about the psychological impact of the device.
Yeah, so part of the reason why the V2 rocket was fearful wasn't just the destruction. Um, it was the fact that it couldn't be intercepted because it moved so fast. A regular plane couldn't intercept it. And so a weapon that can't be stopped is by definition scary. The only way to deal with it was really to go to where they were firing the thing and take out the launcher. That was really all you could do. That's part of the psychological terror of what the V2 was. The device itself, yeah, you're okay. I'm glad you mentioned this. The part about the device where they actually start showing the device itself at the testing ground, they had this weird sound going on in the background. It almost made it sound like it was some sort of alien device that they dug out of the ground. It was making sound by itself. That's almost how I felt like they were doing. Obviously, it wasn't. So they had this ominous sound going on while that they were deploying the weapon at the test site. And sure, well, I certainly don't think it should have been a happy tune, but that was the tune they went with, and it's effective. It's a nuclear bomb is frightening. There's no other way to look at it. So I thought that the sound and the music for that whole Trinity scene was really quite awesome. That that part and the part later about the sudden silence and the explosion and then the wall of sound. So those two things taken in conjunction are just really really powerful. That's the highlight of the movie for me.
Yeah, and certainly it was the climax of the film, Darth Plato. And if you can imagine a film that has so much, and there is a climax in the film, which I can't remember the point. It takes place maybe 1 hour and 53 minutes, but PCV M99 says, I also I never felt so much nervousness during a film. From when the bomb went off, hearing it in Dolby was crazy. That made me feel like you were in a roller coaster waiting for it to drop. It's very interesting. Certainly, it's undescribable. PCVM99, you did a good job of describing this, but it is undescribable in experience, and that is actually part of the psychological
Yeah.
Effect, isn't it? Darth Plato. Of course, we're watching it. We're not physically affected, uh, being hurt by it, but that is part of the psychological effect.
Yes,
Um,
but very different. Yeah,
yeah,
for as far as the audience goes, yes. As far as the people at the time, it's a very different from the V2 though, because the V2 was scary because of the psychological effect, not necessarily because of the destruction it caused. The destruction was actually very minimal because there was no way to aim the thing really. You couldn't pinpoint accurate the rocket. It was just something they fired off and you didn't know where it was going to go. The atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a completely different thing. There, you have a very real strategic use for the bomb. So yeah, it's psychological, but it was also very strategic in how it was used. Unlike the V2, where they were just firing it off and
and I think it was very. I thought it was. I thought if we were if from a cinematographic point of view, which we all know that this film is going to win for best cinematographer, or at least be nominated for it, right, Darth Plato? I think that from this point of view, if we're trying to understand the impact, you certainly are reminded by Oppenheimer in the room, and I'm not sure if he actually said that, but the point is that you were reminded entirely about what it actually meant. While I'm not saying that the other people in the room didn't, but Oppenheimer said it to remind the viewer about it. Now, the other thing that I was going to say, at least that's my interpretation of it, was so after the Trinity experiment is a success, Darth Plato.
yes, it is.
Um, we know that they make multiple devices, but there's two, which
Yeah,
go on.
there were 4 devices, one for the test and 3 to be used.
Yes.
2 were used immediately. 1 was held in
Yes.
reserve.
And they go on the
Yeah.
Enola game. We know all this stuff. Like we know
Yeah.
a lot of the details of this because it's been reported. So that wasn't necessarily something that was a secret, because after it was dropped, it was no longer a secret, right?
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is there's a scene where after the Trinity experiment,
Mhm.
you can see the boxes and the
Yeah.
bombs, which are enormous, they're huge, are in boxes and crates,
Yeah.
and they're being taken away. And we knew this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen. But why does it feel like, I don't know, I could see how as they were leaving, it felt like, I don't know, like it was a very odd feeling for them to be leaving the Los Alamos. Now, we knew that was the objective.
It was. They
And
did build a bomb and they built it.
and yeah, exactly. However, Darth Plato, when we see it happen, I don't know how you felt about it. I kind of thought, oh, yeah, we knew that was going to happen, but were we supposed to feel reticent at that moment? Because I felt a little.
I think the feeling that I got when I watched that scene was like, okay, is the military basically saying, okay, thanks for giving us the bomb, get out of here. That's what it sounded
Yes,
like they were doing.
yes. It felt very. They were ungrateful to the contributions. I'm not going to say that that was true. I'm not going to say that the military felt that way, but it felt that way visually.
Yeah.
It felt like that way, that they were taking, oh, you did it good. Let's take it and get the hell out of here. And of course we knew in, just historically what has happened in this case.
Yeah.
But it really felt like that. Well, I don't know, Mikey Lito, if I did. I just think that they wanted you to visually feel that way, as if, it felt like you were losing something, and it doesn't belong to me. It's not mine.
I didn't feel like Oppenheimer.
I
I definitely felt something.
What were you saying, Darth Vader? You said you felt that they felt unappreciated, or something like that.
It felt like, thanks for giving us the bomb, but we don't need you anymore. We got what we wanted. That's what it felt like.
Mm-hmm. And Mikey Lito says Hoyt van Hoytema was a cinematographer who did some amazing job, Darth Plato.
And that is an amazing Dutch name.
I didn't know that. But certainly, thank you to you for doing such a great this
I
production
wanted I
team.
wanted to mention one more thing before I
Yeah.
forget it.
Yes.
About one more thing about the V2 rocket
Yeah.
is that it was invented by a German scientist named Brown. Interesting enough, Brown went to the United States and became the leading researcher and developer for the rocketry of the Apollo program. So he was one of the leading figures at NASA.
Yeah. He's famous.
That's right. And this was if you've seen For All Mankind, a series on Apple TV, you'll see some of this depicted in season one. I just wanted to throw that in. Anyone that hadn't seen For All Mankind, please watch it. It's a great series. That's sort of my little aside there.
Yeah, it's Von Braun, right? He was famous in rocketry. In fact, he's the reason why we have the entire program, and certainly he's depicted in a lot of films. But he was famous. Like I think he was also might have been on Life magazine or something like that. And what was it? Operation when they brought over a lot of these scientists after the war. The special operation. I don't know what it's called. But a lot of the scientists ended up coming over to the United States after World War II. It's called Operation something, but I can't remember what it's called.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. It was something.
Yeah, there was like a name and then a whole group of them came over under that umbrella to get the space program on its way, right? So, Mike Alito,
Operation Paperclip.
Paperclip. That's right. That's the one. And so, because of that, that's why we had
Yep.
a successful.
Right. And I'll take one step further. If there had been no Second World War, there would not have been a Manhattan Project.
So, what I was going to say is, Mike Alito says, I felt like, no, I didn't. I think this is what I felt. I think this is what I felt, Darth Plato and Mike Alito. Mike Alito says, I don't think Oppenheimer thought they were going to take the bombs. Now, isn't that weird? It's irrational, right? Why would we think that? Because remember, we're talking about how
it's not like they were all civilians. You're surrounded by the military at all times. It's top secret. It's not like the military all of a sudden showed up and took it. It's not like the military showed up.
It's not the middle of the night where they're like, they don't tell you. You wake up the next morning, everything's gone. No, it's not like that.
It's not like they boxed up the Ark of the Covenant and took it. And so, top men now have a responsibility. I'm sorry, I don't agree.
No. I mean, it's something to think about because thank you, Michael Leaner. It's Werner Van Braun. Thank you. I couldn't remember the first name, but he was actually very happy to be in the U.S. As well. I just was going to mention that because he's kind of another colorful figure. I think that they cinematographically speaking, they wanted you to see that Oppenheimer was watching them go away. I think he was concerned about them. He knew what they were going to be used for.
Well, yeah, he knew they were going to be used against Japan. Yeah, I think that's what he was concerned about. But when was this? So the Trinity bombing, I think, was in March. So FDR still would have been alive. What was the date of the Trinity bombing? I don't know off the top of my head.
It was, I don't know off the top of my head either, Darth Plato. I think it was either in March or April, Trinity experiment. I have to look it up. Sorry, guys, just give us a second here.
A YouTube break.
Yes, well, it says, oh man, it doesn't say, wait. July 16th, 1945, Darth Plato. And it says it was the first detonation of
Okay. In that case, it would have been right about the time of the Potsdam Declaration.
Okay.
So in that case, that changes things a little bit. So if it wasn't being boxed up to then, that means they were shipping out to Japan right away. Because the successful testing meant that they could go forward with the invasion of Japan. Remember, the invasion of Japan was only going forward because of the nuclear bomb, because they were going to use the bombs to augment the invasion. When MacArthur learned of the existence of the Manhattan Project, he wanted them to be used for this purpose. So that's why Hiroshima was chosen, because it was a military target, and because it was the nerve center of the defense of southern Japan. It wasn't a civilian city. It was a military target. But the Japanese didn't make a distinction between civilian and military. They didn't think about it the same way we did.
This is a good point. Uh, I think it's Tom Jr. Jackson says, I've been rewatching From the Earth to the Moon. Yes, absolutely, Tom Jr.
Oh,
Jackson.
and one more thing.
Yeah.
After Hiroshima, the second bomb was supposed to be used against a city called Kokura, but the cloud cover there was not favorable. So the Enola Gay, which was carrying the bomb, diverted to a secondary target, and that was Nagasaki. So the bomb was actually supposed to be dropped on Kokura, not Nagasaki.
Hmm. And I guess it was, they actually let us know a great deal of detail, Darth Plato, in this film. And of course, I have to say that it was very intense hearing everyone in the room discuss the list, right, Darth Plato? It
The
was very
list,
intense. The list of targets, potential targets. It was very intense
yeah.
hearing them discuss that. Certainly was.
Yeah, but I don't know if it went down like that though.
It may not have, but you know what I mean, like visually.
I'm very skeptical that that scene would have played out like that.
Hmm.
That would have been something the army would have done.
All right. Tom Jr. Jackson says, to me, I thought Oppenheimer was very disturbed by the outcome of the bomb because he knew what it meant. Yes, absolutely.
Possibly.
I think that's a good possibility. Tom Jr. Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Alito says scientists don't think that way.
Wait, go ahead. Scientists don't think like what?
It's scientists are into let's develop this crap whether we should or not. Well, you know something? I think we saw something, and a lot of people.
That's possible. Hold on, that's
Yeah.
possible. When I was at Berkeley, I knew a math teacher there, who said his father was was a student at a school in New Mexico, where one of the Manhattan Project scientists was on campus as a lecturer. And people were always asking about his role in the Manhattan Project. Like, did you think about what you're doing is right? And what do you think about it now? Would you do anything different?
Ooh.
And he always answered the question along the well, as a scientist, we don't have to worry about questions like that. So that's how he always answered that question.
Yeah, and it is quite a question to ask.
Sorry.
It's
There's
okay.
there's a dump truck depot 1 block from me, and a motorcycle repair shop a block after that.
That's okay. There's a motorcycle repair shop across the street from where I am, but I'm in the back of the house. Actually, I'm in the front of the house, and the repair shop is on the other side of the block. But I can see the sign from my deck, like where it says,
and also
Empire,
there's a sound.
Yeah, like Empire or whatever.
There's also a sound studio across the here. Unfortunately, it hadn't been used for some time, but Bob Dylan used to go in there with Jerry Garcia.
Oh.
And sometimes you could hear the music going on, and unfortunately we're not in the right time for it. But on a good day, I could hold my mic up to the window and you could actually hear Bob Dylan playing.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That is amazing, Darth Plato. PCVM99 says this movie is definitely in for some Oscars and for sound editing, music, and some scene that is. Yes, it certainly is. I also did want to mention that Cillian Murphy, I hope I'm saying his name right. His acting in this, he had to carry a lot of this film. There was a lot more than the average actor would have to do, and a good portion of the scenes he was in or in with other people. So there wasn't a lot. Yeah. There wasn't a lot. There wasn't a lot of scenes where he wasn't present.
Right.
Right, Darth Plato. And I think that thank you, Killian. I think that for someone who has to play this role for a 3-hour film must have been very demanding on him. There were a lot of close-ups, Darth Plato, a lot of close-ups.
He was one of my favorite actors going into this movie. He certainly is now. That could not have been an easy role to do. This is a really good role. And also, remember, did you notice the scene where he was on horseback? There's one scene where he's on horseback.
Yes, I think I have that scene or something like it here.
I couldn't when I saw that scene, I couldn't help but think he looks exactly like Tommy Shelby, and Peaky Blinders, and that's like I thought he was gonna pull like a 20s or a pistol.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Certainly, kind of bring you back to the role he played there, guys. The first film, one of the first films, not the first film, but one of the first films that I saw him in was a film called Anthropoid. And
Right.
about Operation Anthropoid, a bombing by, let's say, and I may not be describing this correctly, but Czechoslovakian soldiers who made
They
an
would.
attempt to bomb one of the SS soldiers, and they were successful. They were successful in doing it, and it was a great film, and he was excellent in this film. But I haven't seen him in something like this. I think this is he might be known for this role. I think he'd be known for this role as the guy who played, like the guy who played Ike Eisenhower. I can't remember that, or General Stratton or Patton. Actually, the guy who played Patton, that actor, how he became known for that role. I think he's going to be known for this Oppenheimer role for maybe the rest of his life because it is so profound.
It
Uh,
is. I'm not sure I quite put him on the level of George C. Scott. He's a very good actor. I'm not sure I put him quite on that level yet.
Well, I think that that this particular this is a role of a lifetime,
Yeah, it is.
and I think that for what he needed to portray this character as, obviously he is not Patton. This is not General Patton he's
No.
playing. But in order to play this role, it must have been very draining. In fact, there are some scenes. Darth Plato, you mentioned some of these scenes where uh, if I even say this correctly, we can see him sitting at the table and he's being interrogated. And those scenes are not necessarily always the easiest ones to do. There was a lot of tension in some of the scenes, and I think he handled that tension beautifully. Of course, the sound also added to it. We actually even hear, I think there's this one or two screams in some of the sound editing during the film, um, which is placed in. And you visually you can't see where the scream is coming from, but I think the scream is supposed to represent, the horror and the fear and different things involved in this. But certainly, I think he's going to be remembered for this role, Darth
Yeah.
Plato.
Actually, I'm going to ask Rob about this. When I, next chance I get to talk to Rob, I'm going to ask how does Cillian Murphy in this movie compare to like George C. Scott Patton or Marlon Brando's Godfather?
Okay, I, for me, yeah, this is a good point. If there was another historical figure, I would want to ask that question. And I hear what you're saying for The Godfather. That was a huge film. I'm trying to think of if he played any historical figures. I don't.
Who did Cillian Murphy play in Anthropod?
In Anthropoid, it was I don't remember the role.
Okay. Well,
Um,
the German guy that they attacked was Reinhard Heydrich. He was the
yeah, yeah,
number 3 man in the SS.
yes.
Yeah, that
Have
was
you
that
seen
was
the film?
Yeah, anthropoid means diametrically opposed. So that's
Yeah,
what the
it was
word.
Operation Anthropoid.
Yeah, yeah.
So he played. I have to look it up because I don't remember any of this.
So an anthropoid position would be one. An anthropoid opposition. That's what it means. It means that they're diametrically opposed.
He played Joseph. I can't pronounce the last name.
That is,
Gabsik. I can't pronounce this. It
I
was a
can't see it.
Slavic soldier in the Czechoslovakian army involved in Operation Anthropoid. I don't have it in front of me. I'm gonna bring it forward. I'm gonna bring it
Well,
forward.
if it's a Czech name, I won't be able to pronounce it either. I don't know.
Well, okay, but I'll bring it up anyway so we can see it. So you at least know what I'm. I think we're talking about the same thing anyway. But I'm not good at pronouncing names in languages that I don't speak. So he plays. Yeah, this is the character that he plays. I'm actually going to click on it.
Joseph.
Um, Joseph Gapsik, and he
No,
was a Slavic
no.
soldier in the Czechoslovakian army involved in Operation Anthropoid. The assassination of Reichsproktor, Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, Reinhard Heydrich. So this is him, and I guess he gets caught. I can't remember what happens at the end of the film, but all I know is that it's a successful attack
Yes.
on, let's say
Yes, sort of. What they did was they set a bomb on the road, and so when his car went over it, it blew up. And then but he didn't. He wasn't killed. He got out of the car, and so they tried to rush the car and shoot him. And Reinhardt and his driver wasn't just a driver. He was also a marksman, and the two of them were able to shoot them all dead. And then they went to the hospital, and while he was at the hospital, he came down with a blood infection from maybe malpractice or something. Then he died in while recovering in the hospital.
But you
I
haven't seen the film.
I have not, but I know
Okay.
I'm familiar
Well,
with the incident.
I'd like you to see the film and just give me your impression of his performance as the soldier, because I think you'd enjoy it. It was very, very good.
Okay.
Um, and of course, the last thing I want to mention, we haven't actually even begun to talk about all the actors. Uh, Robert Downey Jr.,
Yeah.
Darth Plato, in this
Yeah.
film, has quite a prominent role, and he was remarkable in this.
He is. Well, he's remarkable at everything he does.
He was, and I think this might be his best performance. Um, what do you think, Darth Plato? Is this an
I don't know about it.
Oscar-worthy performance for Robert Downey?
No, as his best performance, I don't think so. I'm not begrudging his performance here. I'm not begrudging it. It's a good performance. I'm just saying that compared to other things he's done, I got to go with Iron Man.
Okay, okay. Hi, Brogu. Hope you were well.
The first
I think he
movie.
could have been. I think he could have been. Was he nominated? They didn't nominate him for that, did they? I wish they had, because he was great in those roles.
He was, but come on, you know how the Academy are. They're going to be snobby about stuff like that. Wait, you want me to nominate Iron Man for an Oscar? Yeah, they're not going to do that.
Well, okay. Well, I think he's going to get it for this role.
Okay.
And I think that he, along with, I can't remember this guy's name. Darn it, I'm forgetting everything. We just saw him he was such a prominent role in Stranger Things. And of course, we've seen him in, I think, in The Band Played On, in so many movies. And we talked about this cast, which was amazing. So many famous people, individuals who were important in the United States at the time, in the government, in the military, lobbyists, you name it. It was incredible to see the groups of people. We even, and as you said, saw Malik play one of the roles. Here's another actor here. You remember, let me see if I can pull up some of the names, because I feel a little silly not saying all their names, but that's Josh Hartnett,
Yep.
Who plays a scientist. Here's another a gentleman who plays another scientist, also a New Yorker who bonds with Oppenheimer on the train. And it just goes on and on with the performances there. And of course, you can see Josh Hartnett. He's one of the scientists. I call them engineers too, because what they're creating is, obviously they're physicists, but what they're creating is like an engineering marvel. So, regardless of what they're doing, here are Robert Downey Jr. and Murphy together. They had great chemistry despite the friction. This is something else that I wanted to touch on. What did you think of? Thank you, Mikey Ludo. It was Matthew Modine. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you doing that. Thank you, Mikey Ludo. Right, that's right. It was Matthew Modine. He was and The Band Played On, which is one of my favorite documentaries that he was in with Lily Tomlin. Yeah, but I did just want to talk about the chemistry between these two, because they're supposed to be, initially it seems as if they are, I'm not going to say bosom buddies, but let's just say, he's speaking to him just like any other average person would. But then the film, and I do want to ask about this, because for those of you who have seen it, there is tension between these two characters, and tension that they are implying that Oppenheimer is completely unaware of. And I understand that can happen. Darth Plato, what did you think about how this was perceived? It became a good portion of the film after the Trinity, the successful Trinity experiment. What did you think about it? And what did you think about the climactic part where we do see Malik come in and talk about what's happening to Oppenheimer?
I don't know what to think of it. It just seems like was he one of Strauss's people?
He is Strauss.
Hmm?
He is Strauss.
That's Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah,
Oh, it is. Okay.
it's a small picture, and I'm sorry,
Okay,
I wish
I
I could
wasn't making
say
the connection that was Robert Downey Jr. Okay, so I think Strauss wanted. I look at that whole thing where with the panel where they're all sitting there, and he was calling witnesses and stuff like that. Strauss, I mean Robert Downey Jr.'s character. What he's doing there is called hoisting his own petard. He's he's trying to. He's trying to make an example of this guy, Oppenheimer. He's trying to make an example of him. So, and I mentioned earlier in the movie, because he wants to get on the cabinet. He wants to say, "Oh, look at me! I exposed this guy. He was the head of the Manhattan Project, and he turned out to be a spy. And you have me to thank for busting him. Got a cabinet position open? That's what he's doing. He's hosting his own petard."
And I think it is interesting too. It's controversial to put this in the film. I think it was not necessarily easy to depict because we know there's political intrigue and there's currying favor and all sorts of things that do happen in a film like this. Tom Jr. Jackson mentions that his favorite Matthew Modine film is Gross Anatomy. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to rewatch that, Tom. I haven't watched that in a while. And Mark Spector's avatar for a $4.99 super chat. Thank you, Mark Spector. I so appreciate it. Says Darth Plato, Robert Downey Jr. is basically acting like Robert Downey Jr. in Iron Man. He acted his ass off in this movie, and he will win awards.
I'll take your word for it. I don't know how Robert Downey Jr. acts in real life. Well, I'm glad that you know him personally, apparently enough to know that.
Well,
Maybe this is just really well known. I just didn't know that.
Well, you know something, Darth Plato. This is something that's really important.
Right.
This was a major role for Robert Downey Jr.
Okay.
And playing this role, he's always going to be known for this role in this Oppenheimer film, which is true. I think that this was a great role for him. Is he going to win awards? I'm not sure. I hope he does. I think he
should. I think so.
But it's not. You don't always get historical roles like this. And so when you get something like this, Robert Downey Jr. should have been playing stuff like this for years already. Like he should have been playing tons of stuff like this. He had a lapse in his career for some time, and therefore he didn't get to do that. But now that things, are a little different for him, and he's passed any hurdles, and he's done Iron Man, he's done a bunch of other things. He's perfectly capable of doing that. I'd like to see where he goes and gets more roles like this, because we need people to play these roles. And I think he had good chemistry with Murphy, and you can't tell in the beginning that there is any animosity, Darth Plato, until the end, where it's like, oh, quelle surprise, I thought you were my friend. And, I just thought it was very interesting to show that, and deciding to show people come to his bat. JFK came to his bat, said, hey, I don't like this. I don't like what you're doing to Oppenheimer, the guy who, helped us, do everything and potentially, let's say, historically end World War II. I don't like what you're doing to him in this character assassination, if you will. I'm paraphrasing, but they mentioned very clearly that he voted against the nomination for Strauss. I thought it was very interesting to show this other element that they connected in the film. Were they that connected? I'm not sure. But it certainly was interesting to watch. I didn't know that that's what this was leading to, Darth Plato. Another interesting part to add into a film that was unexpected. And I guess if I had listened to more of the book, I would have read a little bit more and known. But
well, I'm not the connoisseur that most of the audience is. I'm more of a history guy than a movie guy. So my understanding of Robert Downey Jr. is Weird Science, Tropical Thunder, at least I think that's what it's called, and Iron Man. That's where I know him from, and I've always liked him as an actor. And I think he kills it. And when I saw Iron Man, I thought, this is a great actor. I don't know why they should give him other roles in this. Apparently, if he's acting like himself, I'll take your word for it. As far as the movie, his role in this movie, yeah, I think he absolutely should get Best Supporting Actor, possibly.
Yeah, and like I said, he was kind of out of the picture because he had some issues that he had to deal with. Um, but there, he is saying that it's like he's as good as he was in Iron Man. I guess that's what he's saying. But
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah, I didn't see Chaplin. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah, and Sherlock Holmes.
I saw him in Chaplin, and I liked that role. Um, but he didn't win for that, and it was a big deal that he got the Chaplin nomination, and I was happy for him for getting that. So, thank you, Mark Spector's Avatar, for the 4.99 super chat tonight, and I appreciate that as we're
Mhm.
talking
I'll stand corrected.
um, there. So now, Darth Plato, let's continue just to talk a little bit more about some of the other actors here. We see a lot of the actors here in this picture. Here's Emily Blunt, who plays Oppenheimer's wife in the story. Not an easy role for her because she finds herself kind of in a very uncomfortable position. As I had mentioned before about a lot of her information getting out, and you don't want to have your dirty laundry out there. But there she is, surrounded by a bunch of other scientists here. They did a great job of showing us. Yes, I agree with you, um,
Yeah,
Mikey Lito.
one of the best actresses today for sure.
Yeah, she was wonderful in this. There's a scene where someone saw her and uh, they wanted to shake her hand, and she just looked at them and she was like, "Yeah, it's not happening. You tried to hurt my husband, and I don't like that. That's not happening." Um,
That's
and
because she. Like, I just said it. She knows exactly what was going on. That he's trying to hoist his own petard, and she knew it. I'm not shaking your hand. I know exactly what you're trying to do.
I loved that. I think she certainly conveyed that there. Science Lady. Hi, Science Lady, for £2. Hi, Science Lady. I so appreciate the $2 super chat says, I have just got back. Thought it was pretty good. Well, Science Lady, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. So far, I've been hearing pretty much positive reviews across the board of the film. What about you, Darth Lato?
I do. I don't think the spectacle of the movie detracts from the movie at all. I think it bolsters it. I think it's a good movie overall. It was a little long for my taste. I will admit that is one complaint I have, but because I just don't like sitting down for so long in a movie. So that's just a personal thing for me. If you're able to sit down for the full length of the movie, that's fine. That's cool. But I think it's one of the best period pieces I've seen. It's a very different movie because it's not really a war movie, but nevertheless, it's very pivotal for the outcome of a war. It reminds me a lot of the foreign film I saw used to call it Diplomacy. It's um, basically just two guys talking to each other the entire movie about sparing Paris the destruction of the war, and very little happens in the movie apart from what you see these two guys talking to each other. In Oppenheimer, and most of what's going on is conversational. It's hardly any action at all, if any. And I've never seen a movie like this.
Yeah, that's another good point too, and certainly it is something to think about. Um, it was a lot of work to get this entire thing working together, and I have to give them a lot of credit for this. I don't know how. Oops, sorry. I don't know how or at what point um, they were able to pull all this together. It was remarkable. And we don't always see this every day. As I said, this is a historical figure. But I just love what we saw here. And let's continue with some of the rest here. And I certainly am going to continue to do that. Let's
Gary
see.
Oldman.
Exactly. Um,
I didn't even know that was Gary Oldman.
I know, right? It's unbelievable. Um, Something to think about. Um, and I think that he did a great job there. And I didn't know everybody who was going to star in the film. I think that just the fact that they did tell us what they told us was remarkable. But um, the undertaking of this film, from the locations to everything, it was just unbelievable. Let me continue going on here with the stars. And there he is with Matt Damon. Let me keep going here. there was other parts where, let's say, after he wanted to kind of, or at least he seemed to encourage the government to return Los Alamos to, let's say, the Native Americans. That's actually what he said in the story. Um, Certainly, the government decided to continue research in, because we're now in the atomic age, and they focused on this knowledge. And someone earlier in the chat had mentioned this. Someone had mentioned that this discussion between the two, was it you, Darth Plato, about how Oppenheimer went up to Einstein, and
This
I
is
also don't. I also don't know if this was an actual conversation, but I imagine it probably was. I have to look in the book and see if it was in there. Um, and how he tells Einstein that, once we start this reaction, we don't know if it's ever going to stop. That's essentially what it's, a chain reaction. And technically speaking, it should continue. Unless, of course, you run out of radioactive isotopes. But I don't want to get too theoretical about it. The point is that they weren't sure if it was going to stop. And I've heard them. I've actually seen parodies of songs played during an atomic bomb. I think it was in Megadeth, where it had said, it was a song, "I don't want to set the world on fire," and then the bomb goes off. But it was in more ways than one, and it might have been not just you.
I believe there was an old 40s group called the Ink Spot that once sang a song like that.
Yes. And it was Mike Alito. Yes. It was probably you. And I think Darth Plato might have mentioned, but I wasn't sure, that they went ahead with this explosion, which was
Yeah,
an experiment. Go ahead.
I kind of made me wonder what was really going on in that conversation. Were they really concerned about that? I'm just kind of wondering, because if they really were worried about that, then I think that they would have not done it. So I kind of wonder what's really going on in that conversation. I have to look into that.
I think that they have to present different possibilities of outcomes. And that's part of, like, well, what is your outcome? What's your expectation? But I'm not sure, because I'm not a theoretical physicist, and I haven't really ever even read a theoretical physicist peer-reviewed paper or anything like that. Like, I've never read one. So I can't tell you, because each discipline is very different. And I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Sometimes they don't publish papers for a long time. It could be years. So it is very different for that discipline than what I know. I'm looking for a picture of Kenneth Branagh, but in character, and I can't seem to find one here. But Kenneth Branagh's performance was remarkable. Please let me find one. There's a lot of photos in here, guys. Maybe I could just query one in the meantime, but which I think I will do. But the all-star cast, I can understand why someone would even want to be in this film. Let me see. And I think it was Tom Jr. Jackson who was saying that it might not have been Tom, but someone had said that they were surprised to see him in there. But I just thought he was spectacular in this role. Is this him? No, that's yeah, that is him. It says that they reunite again. Kenneth won the best screenplay for his movie. I think it was called. It wasn't Dublin. It was something like it was a movie he wrote a screenplay for. I can't remember what it was called, but I'm not going to find this. I'm looking for him as that character, but he was amazing in it. I wish I could show it to you guys. It wasn't called Dublin. It was called, what was it called? Do you remember, Darth Plato?
I don't know.
He won for best screenplay for a movie that he wrote the screenplay for about his childhood. And it was about, I think it was a Belfast. Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Tom. He won for best screenplay for Belfast. And that was a great screenplay. I thought A Licorice Pizza was going to win, because I like, I think it's Paul Anderson might be the screenplay writer there.
Yeah, that sounds like a Cillian Murphy film, Belfast.
Yeah, it does. And Kenneth Branagh was amazing in that, but I wish I could find the picture of him. But I can't find it. I don't know if I could find one for him there. But he was amazing in this film. And I do want to talk about this super chat from Science Lady. It's a £5. Wow, Science Lady, thank you so much. Hey, Science Lady, we hope you're well. Says, my brother is an astrophysicist. We had a great pretty good discussion afterwards. I am a fan of Niels Bohr's work and pretty pleased to see Kenneth Branagh playing him. Yes. About the only thing I really know about him is that he made a Niels Bohr model of the atom. And I know a few of his experiments, but I don't know anything beyond, let's say what's written in a textbook. But yes, it was great, right? Seeing Niels Bohr. I also think Kenneth Branagh is a very attractive gentleman. So there, I put it out there. It was great to see him too. And I also want to talk just a few more characters before we wrap up. I know we're going on 2 hours, and Darth Plato, I didn't tell you I was going to keep you here for 2 hours, and I apologize for that.
That's
However,
right.
there's a lot to discuss, and to be honest with you, I also would like, if you have some other things that you want to discuss about the film, you should go ahead and discuss them. I just want to see if I can find that. He plays a president, right? I really want to show him as that character, but it's okay. I mean, I'm sure we'll see it later on in another frame here somewhere. Maybe not in these stills, but I really would have liked to have shown that here. So, but yes, he does such a great role, and I'm not surprised that he was great in it because he's a fantastic actor. So, him as an addition to the film was wonderful. And I did mention that Malik, and you did mention that he was in the film too, right? Darth Plato. You said that
Yeah,
you,
there you're testifying.
yeah, he was fantastic in this as well. Um, I thought he certainly was wonderful. He won the Academy Award for playing, in Queen. It may not be called Queen, but he won the Academy Award for that, and I felt like
I haven't
he
seen
was
that.
good. What did you think of that one?
I don't know. I saw him in Papillon. I thought he did a pretty good job on that.
Hmm. I think he did a good job with the lead singer of Queen, whose name is escaping me. But the point is that they brought a lot of Oscar winners into this movie. Who else did we want to talk about before we end this, guys? And thank you for those of you who have sticking around. Florence Pugh was also in the film. We talked about her. You said you hardly recognize her in it.
I
Um,
didn't. Yeah.
I I think that she was wonderful in this too. And yeah, Science Lady, I'd like to hear that conversation you have with your brother who's an astrophysicist. Certainly would be interesting to have discussions like this afterwards. Yeah. So, so
You mean
that was,
the doctor's in?
yes. And,
You should do that. The doctor's in, and just have like some real brainy person on.
well, it's a thought, and certainly something to think about. And I'm sure there were some things planned in panels going for. It's probably a panel at the cons about this. Delta Ray Studios, KAI, hi, Delta Ray Studios says afternoon all and Barbie. That is another movie that a lot of people are talking about. Thank you, Tom. Freddie Mercury was the name, and Mike Alito said he didn't know either. But boy, he seemed like a government official and the type of person at that time. I love that era of the I believe it might have been 1960 that we saw there. And they showed, okay, so this is my last question, very, very last question. I promise, guys, this is the last question. And it has to do why some parts of the film are in black and white and other parts of the film are in color.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I noticed that too.
yeah. What are your thoughts, Darth Plato, about
Uh, I was okay with it. It didn't bother me. I was wondering what the purpose was. I mean, I don't know anything about directing a movie. I assume that no one knows what he's doing, and he had a reason for it. I'd be curious to know what it is.
I thought that the black and white parts might be when he's having trouble, and the color ones are perhaps not so much trouble. I could be wrong on that regard. Some of the interrogation, maybe not all of it, I'm not sure. However, it is something to think about. Um,
I
uh,
don't know about newsreels. I don't know. And people in that time, if you look at that time, people would have been in black and white. That's true, but I don't know. If we're gonna show if we're gonna show a movie from the 1500s, does that mean we're gonna pause and show paint and just show painting with voice overlay? I don't know. The people of that era, I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, it's something to think about. Here's another meeting that was had. I think this one was post after the. I'm not sure. Maybe after the war, where they were talking about what they should do next. There was a lot of meetings, and we were present for a lot of that. Um, so I do have to say that I'm very happy at the way it was presented. And Okay, so we do get a comment from Basement Brothers. Hey, Basement Brothers Collectibles, how are you? It says black and white were historical moments where color were open to interpretation. Is that true? Is that true, Basement Brothers Collectibles? I didn't know that. Something to think about. Um, Mikey Lito talks about it and says Oppenheimer contains scenes in both color and black and white. The color scenes are supposed to be from Oppenheimer's perspective, while the black and white scenes are from Louis Strauss.
Okay.
Oh,
That might be true. Yeah.
oh, his viewpoint is always in color. Thank you, Mark Spector's Avatar, Mikey Lito, Basement Brothers Collectibles. Thank you, Mark Spector's Avatar. Thank you, all of you guys, for putting that in there. Gee, Darth Plato, there's a lot more involved in the notion of what's happening in this film and the interpretation of it. I don't know whether everybody will pick up on that, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll watch the movie again when I can see it in subtitles, and I'll definitely look for that.
Yeah, I mean here, okay, so here's a black and white one. Now I'm gonna have to think about this. Um,
There's Cillian Murphy there.
yeah. Looking at that, there's Strauss. Um, there's some other parts there. And all right, guys. So final thoughts about this film, Darth Plato, that we haven't said that you want to reiterate. Anything you want to talk about or say about this phenomenal film, Darth Plato? Um, what would you what other things did you think about or
Well,
uh,
off the top of my head, I'll say that this is a more significant historical event than people realize because of the implications it had for strategic thought and military science. But I won't get into that anymore. It had the war would have been much worse if the Manhattan Project had not taken place. If there had been no Manhattan Project, there would have been an invasion of Japan, and that probably would have gone at least until 1947, quite possibly. And you would have seen the Soviets invade Japan as well because they were going to invade Hokkaido on November 1st, 1945. So you would have had the Soviets and the Americans both pushing from two directions. So maybe it wouldn't have lasted until 1947. We don't know. We have an idea that it would have been tenacious because of what happened to Okinawa, because Okinawa was seized as a stepping stone for the invasion of Japan. That was the only reason why Okinawa took place, and that was brutal fighting on Okinawa. So we had every reason to think that the fighting would have been awful, just awful on Japan, and that would like you might have ended up with a situation of a split Japan, like we saw with Germany. We have each Germany and a West Germany. You might have seen something like this here. We have a Japan and a South Japan because the Soviets were coming down from the north and the Americans from the south. So that could have happened. The history of Japan would have been dramatically different if that had been the case. And people just don't really grasp this stuff. When I was talking about this with people, I've talked about with people locally at Berkeley, Army War College, and people just don't get how serious this really would have been if there had been an invasion. And also the other angle about the implications to, excuse me, to military science. But we can get into that another time. As far as the movie goes, it's a phenomenal movie. It wasn't what I expected. I wasn't sure what to expect from this movie. I was expecting a period piece. I wasn't expecting. I guess I should have known better because Cillian Murphy, one of my favorite actors. I highly recommend this movie to anyone that wants to. If anyone wants to learn something and just be blown away, please watch this movie. If you don't like long movies, this probably isn't a movie for you. If you're not a history guy, if you just want to have fun at a movie, yeah, I don't. This may not be your movie. I don't know.
Interesting. And I did want to mention Science Lady says, I love Killian Murphy from Peaky Blinders. I love him in Peaky Blinders.
You
Peaky
mean
Blinders.
you
Okay.
mean Tommy Shelby?
That's right. Peaky Blinders. I have to say it like that because I love it. I just wanted to thank Mark Spector's Avatar, Mikey Lito.
Do you know
Um,
why? Do you know why they were called Peaky Blinders?
I think so. I
Yeah,
don't remember right now, but I think
they
I
had
remember.
they had razor blades in the caps, so they would take their razor blades off and hit you with the cap, and it would cause it right on the eye on your forehead, and it would cause blindness because the blade is going into your eye. That's why they were called Peaky Blinders.
Exactly. And I also want to thank Mikey Lito, Mark Spector's Avatar, Basement Collectibles, and yes, for letting us know about the black and white color aspect, which was great. Um, and who else is here? Uh, oh, yes. Mikey Lito gives it a 9.0 out of, I'm assuming, out of 10. That's a high score. Darth Plato, did you want to give it a score out of 10?
On a score of 10, I'll give it 9.95. A 9 sounds about right. I'm not going to gainsay Michaelito.
Mikey Lito has a review on his channel, Mikey Lito Live. So, guys, go ahead and look at Mikey Lito Live, his channel here on YouTube, if you'd like to see his review, guys. Science Lady says there was a lot of young people in the cinema when she went to go see it. Thank you for letting us know that. Um, Basement Brothers Collectibles says, thank you all. I enjoyed listening, and tell RMB hello. We will. We will say hello to him. Mark Spector's Avatar is asking me, why'd you stop gaming? I didn't. I haven't continued. I'm kind of hanging out at the beach a little bit more, Mark.
Her license was suspended.
That too. Certainly, Tom Jr. Jackson mentions it. And I do just want to thank everybody who gave in super chats today. I want to thank Rebel Sky. Rebel Sky will reach out to you. Thanks for the $5 super chat. And you gave another one later on. Also want to thank Mark Spector's Avatar for the generosity. Thanks, Mark. Tom Jr. Jackson, collaborator, moderator, and friend. Thank you for everything. Rebel Sky also for your preview clip. I can't wait to see that. Rebel Sky will be in contact with you. And Mark came through with another super chat. Again, Science Lady, who says she just got back. It was pretty good. And talked about her discussion with her brother, who's an astrophysicist. Science Lady, I'm sure that was a scintillating conversation that I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for. Um, and thanks everybody who's was here tonight. I also want to mention that it seems like it's getting high reviews. This is the last thing I'm going to look at is Rotten Tomatoes. It's not really enough time to do too many. IMDb has 43,000 ratings. That's a good amount of ratings. But of course, we're going to find out more. So let me go ahead and look and see if I can find the Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have an astrophysicist in your back pocket. I used to know a guy. I haven't talked to him for 15 years, but I used to know a guy that was an astrophysicist. He did a PhD at the University of Toronto. His dissertation advisor was Carl Sagan. So he had some interesting stories to say.
That is amazing. Darth Plato, thank you for letting us know. And I'm going to just pull up this this little bit here. I'm going to share that. And of course, there's Murphy there. And it says it's 93% and 94%, which is very, very good. And I should mention to you, it's not very many yet. 275 for the critics and 94% for the audience score. We still don't know. It's still a little early. I think maybe if we wait 1 or 2 weeks, we could get a better idea. But certainly,
I think we should get a good. I think Monday would be a good time.
Yeah, you are probably right, Darth Plato. I think Monday would be a good time to see.
Well, you're going to be on Monday anyway with Lorena or Kat or one or the other.
Yeah, I will be. I will be on on Monday for ladies of the PGS. Is this the review? Yeah, this is the review of it. And they're talking about is this possibly the best movie of the year? I would say, yeah, it
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
is.
I would say so.
And there's of course Nolan. He was on The View this morning. My mother watches The View every day, and they talk about the screenplay. And there's some other pictures of Murphy there. I was hoping they would have a picture of Kenneth Branagh here, but I don't think they're going to have one. That would have been too convenient for me to just be able to show you that because I want to show it. But it's okay. I'm fine with it. And thank you guys. This has been a 2-hour. We will say hi to him, guys. I'll let you all know. I'll let Robert know. Everybody in this chat today was saying hello to him too. And hello, Bloodsport One. Hope you are well. Mikey Lito, yeah, my mother loves Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar. So if she doesn't hear Joy going, I don't know, it's so what? Who cares? So what? Or hear Whoopi saying, well, if she doesn't hear those two comments in the course of the day, she's like, I didn't hear Whoopi or Joy. So she just loves them. So I don't know. I kind of love Turner Classics, at least while it's still on for now. Science Lady, don't you worry about a thing. Don't worry. Yeah, Mikey Lito says that the reviewers scored 8.7 out of 10. Gee, I have to say, for me personally, I give this movie a 10.
Really?
Yeah, I think it has everything that you would want in a film, and so much more.
Okay, I tell you what, I'd be curious to know who doesn't think this is a good film and why they think it's not a good film. I'd like to meet that guy.
Well, people are going to have their opinions about films, and they're entitled to do that. But what I was going to say is that if we have to look at all the elements in the film, that the sound editing, the visuals were great, the casting was great, the performances were great, the screenplay, the costumes, the adaptation from the actual book was good for, let's say, people who are not scientists, because you can't have all that science jargon in it. I think it was great. They made a point of telling you very specific things they wanted you to understand. Everybody got the point when they said, oh, we could have set the whole planet on fire. Everybody understood that. The references to political figures was very good. The depiction of, let's say, the interrogation of people who were part of the Communist Party was excellent. And I also thought that the depiction of historical facts was excellent. And those are all the things I'm going off of. I couldn't find any errors or issues with them. So
Yeah, you know what? That's another thing. People really do underestimate the degree to which the Soviets were trying to infiltrate America. This was a really big deal back then. I mean, look, let me give you an idea how trivial this was. What the Soviets did was they would send spies for no other reason than to report prices at the supermarket. So they would say eggs sell for this, milk sells for this, and they would just go to the supermarket and just write it all down. And they would just send that, and then the whoever it was in charge over there would set their prices based on what they see over here. It was really awful, how what was going on in in the Soviets, because the economy was all messed up. I won't get into the communism and all that stuff, but it's really messed up how it all working over there that they would even need to do this. They sent spies for such a simple thing like that. They had spies for everything. It was really a lot more involved than people realize.
yeah, you make such a good point in this, Darth Plato. It was more, I think for what we were talking about in the context of this film, it was a great introduction to what we were seeing. And as you and I were talking about earlier in the broadcast today, how I felt that seeing, even sort of maybe not the spies part, but even the party part here in the US, I didn't know it was as popular as it was depicted. And certainly seemed like a very carefree time, Darth Plato, for them here in the United States to even think about becoming a member of that party. And I'm not judging them. This is their decision. But
They should be free to do that. I don't think they should be harassed, but
mhm. And
I'm not gonna affirm it.
right, exactly. But I wasn't expecting to see that level of detail in this film. I'm walking away completely enriched with feeling as if I was somebody in the room, Darth Plato. I feel like I was in the room. We were all in the room. We got a chance to see what was going on, even behind the scenes when there's a scene where one of the guys who works with Strauss kind of has a one-on-one with him. And I liked that scene because we knew certainly there was, there was tension. There was tension in this film, and some of the tension was uncomfortable. Um, and certainly there was nothing trivial, I thought, in this film as well. Uh,
Uh,
so
yeah, unless you want to count the nudity thing, that could be trivial. But I liked your explanation for it earlier. I will go with that.
and I think that certainly you notice that they focused a lot on his wife during that scene. Um, she was not happy that he did that. And it's okay for her to feel possessive of her husband and to have those feelings. I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel that way about their spouse. Finding out something like that, it's devastating. She was devastated. So, and everyone knows about it now. Before, it might have just been a few people.
Yeah, what is it with Killian Murphy and communists? If you noticed in Peaky Blinders, he had an involvement with one of the young communist leaders too.
I don't think he's going by that factor. He's just going by a hotness
I
factor.
know.
And I think it's great that they are showing that scientists, and like many people, not everybody, need intimacy in their life. It was very ballsy to start off the film with the poison apple, which certainly they didn't have to even talk about that part, but they wanted to show something very.
That's true.
Yes, it is true.
Really?
Yes, yes, it's in the biography.
Would you count this as a biopic?
Um, I can't because I don't know. I haven't fact checked everything.
Okay.
So I
Yeah, I heard that Nolan doesn't consider this a biopic. He specifically said it was. I don't remember reading that. I remember someone saying that, but I don't know if that's actually true.
I think that he was in a position where he had to dramatize the facts, even if they are historically accurate. I think he was in a position where he had to dramatize the facts because there wouldn't have been any payoffs in the film. He had to have payoffs in the film to keep people interested.
All
And
right.
so,
Okay.
I mean, what do you think, Darth Vader?
Well, I can't gainsay that. I assume Nolan doing is knows what he's doing. I've liked his movies since Batman Begins, and that makes sense to me. The last thing I'm going to say, aside after recommending the movie, is what was I going to say? I'll remember it. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say thank you to everybody who is here for this 2-hour discussion. We definitely went into this. The film itself is a 3-hour film, and I think we could have certainly. Oh, so am I, science lady. I am also a biologist. Yes, we're actually questioning whether if it's correct to the book it's based on, science lady, the biography and his life, and let's say actual dates and things. So I don't know if all the dates and maybe some events were depicted before others for the sake of a film. And we know they have to do that sometimes, right? Certain things can appear out of order, and something might have happened before another. So those were some things that I thought. I couldn't tell you whether or not the timeline is absolutely perfect and things like that.
Yeah, I think there's a slight problem though when looking at people monolithically. You can't do that. Even for people like the Japanese, you can't really do that. So, showing how the bomb would have been seen by the Japanese people, it really depends on who you were. After Hiroshima was dropped, there was a British investigation team that looked into this, and they thought that the military actually became emboldened by the bombing because the total number of casualties had gone down. The bombing campaign in Tokyo was higher than Nagasaki and Hiroshima combined. So the casualties had not gone down. So they were sort of like, the, and maybe the ultimate case of glass half full, glass half empty sort of thing. They said, "Well, the casualties are going down. The war is starting to go our way," and that was how they reported it at their boss's meeting where the emperor was attending. It was pretty. It's amazing that they did that. It was Hirohito himself who unilaterally decided, "I'm going to end this," even though he wasn't supposed to do that. And how the bomb was affected by different people, it really depends on who you talk to. And but the bomb was not used as a demonstration of its power. The bomb was used to as it was used to further the invasion of Japan. It was used as a strategic weapon.
And thank you for mentioning that, Darth Plato. I so appreciate you talking about that. And there is a lot to say about this particular, um, uh, let's say, topic that we have not even scratched the surface on, guys. And I do want to mention that. I do want to mention that.
Oh yeah, another one more fun fact.
Yeah.
After Hiroshima, almost immediately afterwards, the Soviets were on the scene. If you look at footage of Hiroshima, the aftermath that the Japanese were taking, you can see Soviet officers there in the distance surveying what's going on. So they were there very quickly. That's just they were interested in what was going on.
Absolutely. Certainly, they had a presence there. And of course, it did change the course of history forever. So that is also something else that has occurred that I think is important to mention. It's a historically significant topic,
Yeah.
maybe one of the most historically significant topics.
Yes.
Hey, Lance from Outcast Creative. Hope you're well. Good to see you. Yes, I'm an evolutionary biologist, science lady, and I have done research in that area. We have a lot to talk about. I'd love to join you on a podcast. I don't know how you're going to get in contact with me. If you go to my YouTube channel page, which is Positive Fandom, guys, I have a channel called Positive Fandom, and Tom Jr. Jackson was kind enough to put the link in here. Just give me a second. I'm almost there. It's here. If you go to Positive Fandom channel, which is my YouTube channel, which I'm also broadcasting to at the same time, but you will find my information. You get in contact with me. Go to the channel and then go to, I think it's about, and then you'll see my email address and you can send me an email if you'd like to. Certainly do hope to hear from you, Science Lady. I went to you, I saw your name in there. Yeah, I would love to talk about science on a panel. If you would like to invite me there, that would be great. Yes, I would love to be involved in a science podcast. Sure hope you're doing well. And hey, Luminara 843 says, "Hey, I got the Barbie dream." You mentioned that to me the other night. I do want to mention, Luminara, that tomorrow night I'm going to be doing a review with Cameron Pasha on the Barbie movie, guys, right here on the Burnettwork at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please do check that out. So that's coming up. And Luminara, you should check out the review that I'm doing with Cameron as well.
Express my thanks to Cameron Pasha for doing it so that I don't have to, because I have no interest in the movie.
I don't want to bore you with the historical significance of Barbie, Darth Plato. But Darth, she is historically significant. And guys, do check out Luminara 843 on the 1/6 scale Man Network. She is the queen of figure flex. Tonight, Luminara, it's tonight, right? Is it now, or did we miss it? Guys, if you have a chance, go over to the 1/6 scale Man Network. That is Lael's channel, and check out Figure Flex Friday. I believe it's either at 6:30 or 8:30. Do check out Luminara 843 on the channel, the queen of Figure Flex. And Luminara, it is a pleasure to see you. All right, Science Lady, like I said, you're going to see my email address on my channel website for YouTube. And just go to a section and you'll see where it has my email address and you can contact me there. The Science Lady, look forward to seeing you. The same for the other young lady by the name of Rebel Sky. Rebel Sky also do the same. Darth Plato, where can people find you?
You can find me right here on the It Show. the Positive Fandom, and occasionally on the Burnettwork.
Yes, and guys, Darth Plato, as you know, this is being broadcast to both tonight. So yes, you can find us both on those. And Darth Plato, it's always a pleasure to have you here. It was 6:30. Okay, so guys, go to the 1/6 Scale Man Network, and you will find. Figure Flex Friday. It was at 6:30. We were on at the same time, Luminara. But I did just want to mention it. Check out Luminara 843, the Queen of Figure Flex, on the 1/6 Scale Man Network, guys. And guys, you can always find me here on the Burnettwork or on my channel, Positive Fandom. I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson, my moderator, collaborator, and good friend. We are all goof people, Tom. Always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for everybody for the super chats. Thank you, everybody who showed up, giving us your opinions about the film, which is an extraordinary film that I think is going to be film of the year. And certainly, thank you for everything. Oh yes, you take care, everybody. And I was going to say, this is an incredible film. So if you haven't seen it, go ahead and see it. But this film will be shown in classrooms, Darth Plato, for years to come because it is so extraordinary. Congratulations to the production team of Nolan and everybody who had a chance to work on this film. It really must be such a pleasure to have been part of this. So guys, just thank you for everything. Everybody out there, hope everybody is well. And I was going to finish the show the way I always do by saying, guys, take care. And remember, guys, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Bye.